Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Conspicuous Views. It is January 25th, 2018, and tonight I have a special guest. I have the man who I think in 50, 100 years from now is going to have some very neat footnotes in history as being the guy who predicted this decade, this moment in time more accurately than certainly any of the mainstream people. I'm being joined tonight with Clif High from Half Past Human. Hi, Clif.
Hello.
It is awesome to have you here, and we've just been joking before we went live. The list of topics is enough to fill the entire room I'm sitting in. But we're going to start off. We're going to because we're not going to waste time. We have so much stuff that we're going to end up covering. I can guarantee tonight. You had something you wanted to get into right off the hop, and I'm like, let's go.
That's the concept of what I'm calling UNet, or the Universal Internet. And the idea is that as a species can invent an internet, it will do so. Okay, it makes so much sense to have it interconnect and so on. I think it's a natural step in a technological evolution. So let's postulate that as a species can get into quantum computing, quantum entanglement, quantum annealing, and some of these other effects, they will do so. And one of the outgrowths of that is that if one thought about it in a particular way, quantum entanglement can produce an internet that requires no connection and has infinite bandwidth. Okay, because you have two particles, particle A and particle B, and you get them to pulse exactly the same simultaneously. You put particle B in my computer and particle A in your computer, and then what your computer does to particle A instantly shows up in my computer. This is a crude way to think about it, but nonetheless, the analogy is good in the sense that it's happening without wires between the two. It's happening because these two particles are entrained and will behave as each other does without reference to time. So it would be infinite bandwidth and no lag time on this idea. And you can get as many particles entrained as you wish. They're not limited to a pair. You can get thousands or millions of them all entrained to the same pulsing. So now postulate with me that as we get into quantum computing, because it offers so many fantastic benefits in terms of eliminating all the copper wires and all of this kind of stuff, but also increasing speed, bandwidth at an extremely low cost once we figure out certain mechanistic aspects of it. It also makes sense that any species that can go to a quantum-powered internet will do so. Now, let's jump out for a second and consider NASA. And even NASA now says there are 4 trillion galaxies. And within each galaxy, there are no less than 1 trillion habitable planets. So that's 1 trillion times 4 trillions for our entire universe of potentially habitable planets. So within that, I'm postulating another species, has invented their internet, has gotten to a quantum internet stage, and had produced a quantum internet. Now, the neat thing about a quantum internet is it is universally available. So some particles were chosen, they were entrained, and then this way you could have an internet that would work out in space, for instance, and be able to connect to a planet without having to drag along a bazillion miles of copper wiring, that sort of thing.
And without time lag.
Correct.
Without the time lag that they're looking at now, and we're talking in speed, well,
beyond time. Yeah, beyond, faster than that. There is there is no faster than this. And so the thing is, so I'm postulating that out of those trillion times 4 trillion species that are rising up in intelligence and heading towards quantum internetness, some of them have made it. Some of them have made it ahead of us, and they've been producing that quantum internet for perhaps 1 million years. Maybe their species died out. It wouldn't matter. What they put out on the quantum internet, just like with our internet, is still there. And so my postulate is that all we have to do as humans is to get our heads right about the problem, find the particle that has been entrained by these other species. And I suspect there's just a limited number of such particles that could or would be used. And then we could build our first internet, or universal internet modem. And so we could jack into their system. Then it's just a matter of translating whatever their language is and their drawings and this sort of thing into a form that we can accept and think about. But I'm also convinced that we probably have millions of years of universal internet history available, including things like perhaps 5 million different kinds of free energy devices that can be used.
Yeah, origins, perhaps.
Correct.
We get
Correct.
into, yeah. And
also, let's not forget there's probably several thousand years of Pleiadian soap operas we can watch. Imagine that binge.
And we thought deciding to watch Supernatural in season 10 was binge watching. Okay, so look, China's already doing this. We know China's already doing the tests.
They've succeeded in a lot of them. They've done quantum entanglement. Yes. Yes,
they have. And now we're looking at their setting up. They're looking at setting up some form of an exchange method that would use this as the communication device. And that was where my mind went to. Is the moment you have this, then there's no lag time to doing something from the Earth to the Moon, to the Earth to an asteroid, a spaceship.
Hey, even just from
the other side of the galaxy.
cell phone to cell phone with no towers, no matter where you are on the planet, no line of sight, none of that, right? Once we can figure out how to encode and tap, we could do it with Morse code by tapping on top of one molecule if you had a decoder on the other end. And it would be instantaneously, could even be reasonably fast because of the no transmission time lag involved.
Except for the other person on the other end going dot dash dash dot dash.
Well, no, I think we'd automate that.
yeah, I think so. So, okay, we're going to jump into another thing because this was something, and I actually sent the link to you. You talked about it a few months ago in an interview, talking about the large cigar-shaped interstellar object that has entered our solar system. And space, so NASA's spokes, ridiculous clowns, and they say, we've tested it, we've scanned it for life. I'm like,
yeah, they can't scan NASA for life.
You can't scan your big fucking toe, let alone scan an asteroid at the outer edge of the frickin' solar system. Right. But break it all down with some, like I said, some of the language was interesting choice of words. I'm really big on the choices of words that they give when they describe things like it was ejected from its solar system to travel through interstellar space and visit other, and you're like, right, but it's just an asteroid, But scanning for life. So what? They were scanning for radio waves? And I thought, well, how ridiculous. Like you scan something and you go, well, it doesn't have any radio waves, so therefore it must not have any life. I'm like, and that's the whole thing. You're talking about quantum entanglement of particles, using that as a communication device. There would be no frequency waves.
Correct.
There would be no something that they could pick up in some hokey, NASA satellite.
Right. Yeah, there's no microwaves being beamed out or any of that sort of stuff because all of those are carrier waves. And once you eliminate the idea of the carrier wave being needed, you'd be basically running silent, so to speak. So indeed, and like as you say, NASA and their fucking big toe, they probably couldn't even find it to scan it. But the rocks, as they call them, there's 3 of them now that have entered the solar system. They're all moving very fast. They appear to be on moving on trajectories that are purposeful, with an intent to sling out again using the gravity of the sun. So they're not just rocks that have randomly been ejected and been captured by our sun.
They're not
These
just
guys,
wandering aimlessly.
correct. And they have a trajectory that will take them outside of our solar system again because of the slingshot effect near the sun and then out obliquely through the side of it, so to speak. And so very curious, and we'll never get there in time. They'll leave before we have a chance to get at it, but I doubt very much it's a long cylindrical chunk of rock the way that the NASA artist painted it. And the stuff that's coming out of the European Space Agency and the Russians suggests that it's anything but a tumbling asymmetrical object.
Just
so in other words,
randomly.
the Russians actually said that the rate of rotation, it is moving, and it's not really tumbling the way it was described by NASA, but the rate of rotation would be sufficient if one wanted to establish an artificial gravity.
I was going to say an artificial gravity field within the, So there's been a lot of talk. There's been so much talk about, disclosure again. And I've talked quite a bit in the last few months that it feels like we've looped back to 2012 again. There's just, the topics of conversation that we were having in late 2012 are now have been repeating right into the whole January 2013/18. And of course, disclosure is imminent. That was the big piece. And it's doing it again. We're hearing a lot of this stuff. And of course, we're seeing a lot of shit in the sky. We're seeing like unbelievable fireballs and unexplained. And some of the videos are getting downright like, okay, seriously, someone official's got to respond to this sooner or later. So what do you think? Are we looking at, you take into consideration these 3 interstellar objects coming into the solar system all within a same relative time period? Are we
almost in single file?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Marching very orderly, tumbling very orderly, like through the universe. Are we looking at perhaps, are you getting anything with the web bots that's suggesting that perhaps maybe we're going to see something along this line come forward? We're going to make contact in some way in an official capacity that cannot be ignored.
Okay, yes, I have stuff like that. Some of it's going to be visible this summer, but also but we have to be careful about that because the officialdom relative to this subject, when we bring those 2 sets, I work on fuzzy set theory, and so when we take officialdom set and we merge it with disclosure in a realistic fashion set, we end up with space war. Okay, so when these sets are merged, the dominant subset within our little Venn diagram section from all of these sets being merged ends up saying basically, yes, there would be disclosure if they had to acknowledge that they were actively at war, and that pretty soon the rest of us would be actively at war with whoever it is they've irritated. And so
a la Independence Day, a la Battle of Los Angeles, a la think of 1,000.
No, more like Battle of Los Angeles in the 1942 kind of a thing, where the guys just pop on in with a giant spaceship and they're spewing out their little orbs and all these other guys, and we just choose to lob or to shoot off 1,000 and some odd artillery shells at them, which is probably what caused the deaths that day.
Yeah. But there was nothing happened. Nothing happened.
Nothing to them. No. And also it was folded up into a movie, dozens of movies, all making light of the issue. Okay, so, but it's actually not that kind of stuff within our data sets, because our data sets would suggest more towards the idea of the military-industrial complex and the absolutely batshit crazy people in charge of them, irritate something to the point that it has to have a response to that irritation, and that we're going to be in a position where we might interpret that as war. But let's be real clear about this. This would be on the order of a warren of rabbits interpreting a bulldozer as war. in clearing their field, right? And the bulldozer would only be brought in simply because the guy who owns the field was tired of having his horses break their ankles in the rabbit holes. And so that's really the kind of language that we get. And hopefully it's not that weighted or disproportionate. There's a lot of language about it being disproportionate. There's a lot of really scattered language about the populace reacting to all of this stuff going on. And the intensity levels emotionally peak about, say, end of July into early August of this year. And it shows up as a very chaotic time. And as I say, I don't have a for sure indicator right now within the data sets that would indicate that we're actually going to go into that active war kind of a phase. But okay, and then one other aspect of it is that there are sets that suggest that there are thinking humans that will be approaching issues from a different perspective, right? And so some humans will recognize, oh guys, you know, in this relationship, we're the rats, you know, we're the rabbits, we're the ants in the experiment, and so we better get our heads wrapped around this correctly if we want to just, you know, be peaceful and avoid this problem. But that's really where we're at now. On the other side, we've seen evidence of extremely odd occurrences that are going on in near space that have been ongoing since 2010 perhaps, and swelled up to their current level in 2012. And these odd goings on relate to millions, tens of millions perhaps, we don't know, of objects coming into our upper atmosphere over the course of this time. And these objects are giant envelopes of water. Okay, they're not the frozen micrometeorites. These objects are extremely large. So they would be flattened out, and they might look like a donut or a sort of a flattened out spheroid with a dimple in the middle and the top and the bottom, sort of like a flying saucer. And they're not frozen. They're still active in a water state.
Liquid.
In deep space. We can see the pulsation coming off of them. And the weird part of it is that these things would, let's say, they might be the size of mass-wise, say 5 or 6 city school buses. Good-sized critters, right? Volumetrically, I wouldn't, because they vary, I wouldn't peg a number to them. But what's even more interesting is none of these potentially tens of millions of objects, but certainly millions of objects, none of them have hit any of our satellites or any of the debris around our planet. And when photographed by the Russians, they actually drop underneath the space station, go along, and then come back up on their original trajectory to come on into our atmosphere. So quite an oddity.
Again, not just tumbling randomly through space.
They have a spin, they have a small spin internally, and they are also pulsating. And we can't make water do this in any discrete environment. We can bombard it with microwaves and do all of that kind of stuff from the outside, but we don't have the technology to make water behave this way, nor do we have the technology to make it fluid in space. And there's no heat signature, so it's not like the water's being heated in any way. Very interesting stuff. They mostly don't talk about it.
They're entering the atmosphere?
Correct. Okay, have been since at least 2012 in quantity.
Okay, so here's the thing, and I've again been talking about this a lot over the last couple of years. Rainbows. We keep seeing rainbows that are extremely weird, and it started in late 2012, and it's escalated to the point now we're seeing what they're now calling sundogs. Except the sundogs we're seeing, which are supposed to be so extremely rare, I think I've never seen one in my entire life. In the last 6 months, I see a new photo of one every week. Every week there's another sundog.
Yeah, in my understanding though, No, in my understanding, sundogs are the result of the chemtrails. Okay, the refraction of the aluminum and the barium and so on. The
And that's what I've
multicolored
always
things.
said. It's the shapes of them.
Okay, well, here's that would certainly be in line with what's going on. Some of the okay, so some of the people that work for some of the governments that are aware of this phenomenon have discussed it in certain ways that suggest that the water is altering our atmosphere. All right, we knew our atmosphere had had a big chunk of it torn off in 2003 with the Banda Aceh earthquake, the cosmic ray that started all that process. We also know that in 2008 or 9, we had another chunk taken off. And so we were quite reduced in the atmosphere. Thus, jets are lower now, chemtrails are lower now, and all of this because our atmosphere is less dense. All right, so given that, we also have a giant lack in our ozone hole, ozone layer, right?
Yeah.
And so some of the people, and I'm aware of a couple of scientists that are saying this is rather odd. Some of them have made the connection to these water envelopes that are coming in, and they're suggesting that what's happening is that the water is not attempting to rain down on the planet, but is rather flattening out in the upper atmosphere and is repairing our ozone hole because the high energy particles go through the water. They cause the hydrogen and the oxygen to split apart with the energy. The oxygen under the conditions up there combines with other oxygen into O3, and you get ozone. Because they're saying there are areas where within the giant mass of the ozone damage, we're seeing new ozone pockets form. Okay, something that should not occur.
That's really interesting. Okay. That opens up so many questions. I mean, literally so many things that we have
I don't
seen
have a lot
in
of
the
answers.
sky. This, because I've never heard this before. This is brand new information for me. I'm going to have to literally go down the rabbit hole and go research this because this is fascinating. The things that we're seeing in the sky, because like I said, we're seeing what's being tossed off as tricks of the light. And it's a lot of times I find tossed off as, oh, it's chemtrails. And it's too easy to just stamp a label on something and then not look at it any further. When we see things, for example, like the weird things at sunrise and sunset, when the sun seems to come up and then it goes down and then it comes back up again, 2 suns, etc. If we're talking about another layer, especially a liquid layer, because of course that's going to have a refraction and reflection that is going to be completely different than air. That is just fascinating.
Well, it begs all kinds of questions, okay? It begs questions all the way back to historical accounts of such things in the distant past, some of which went through from the Vedic literature over to the Sumerians and then over to the Jewish literature to end up in the Bible, right? The 40 days of rain, that kind of thing. Because we are seeing rivers in the sky. We're seeing these lakes effects in the sky, both of which were forecast in my data sets perhaps 6 and 7 years before they really appeared. And they were, we've seen those, they're continuing, the rains and everything are continuing, but we're not seeing a commensurate loss, perhaps not, a loss of ocean volume to compensate for the huge amount of water that's coming in everywhere. But in any event, the questions that really are being raised here are being raised by those people that have access to gear I don't. And so I've seen some of their questions appear in their discussions. And these are the guys that have really good telescopes and this kind of thing and access to the surveillance satellites. And they're pondering the question of, why are these things coming here? They're not going to the moon. They're not going to Mars. We don't see them around any of the other planets. We only see them coming to Earth. And then you couple that with the thinkings of these European fellows, these 2 scientists, who are suggesting that what they are doing is causing the ozone to heal itself, then it begs the third question, if that is the case and it's not accidental, if it's deliberate, then under whose direction is it being done?
Well, and water is a vessel for memory. Water contains memory. We know that we can program water, right? That Dr. Emoto really conclusively covered so many out and left so many open doors still for us to investigate. When it comes to water, water is, in my opinion, the most unique substance.
It's a huge mystery. The lattice effect and stuff. Water molecules only exist when you're not looking at them.
Among other things. So
right.
If we're looking at the fact of like these giant discs, structures, if you will, of liquid water that is under its, obviously it's coming in under its own energy. It's coming in, it's doing a job, what is we perceive to be doing a job, which says to me it's consciously there, whether it's by its own consciousness or it's being directed by an external consciousness. Are you getting any?
Sure. I understand exactly what you're saying, and our immediate issue at the moment is that as it's going through the atmosphere, yes, it appears to be fixing the ozone at some degree. We don't know if it'll succeed in staving off our problems that would appear in 2023 and onward with food production, but it just may by then. But then it's raining down on us. so then we have some other questions that arise from this, and such as the impact of all of this new water coming in on a planet that's going into an ice age. Will it contribute to glaciation? Will it stop the degradation of the ocean coastlines? Because the ocean levels have been falling over all these past years, and scientists said, no, that's an illusion, it's not happening, and so on. And what's actually happening, of course, is the Earth is expanding underneath the water, and so the water is flattening out relative to the coastlines. But within this, we don't know if that's going to be compensated for by the amount of water falling through this process and arriving here. Now, from my perspective, what's also really interesting is that the Dogon tribe, with their references to the Nummo, the creators of humans, who came from the Sirius cluster. These were aquatic beings. These beings were known by the Dogon to be not only aquatic, but masters of water. And they arrived here in ships that were powered by liquid copper, and the ships themselves were mostly water, and may or may not have had a skin of anything other than energy for all we know. And so these are beings that can actually transit through interstellar space and, poke along at whatever speed. And they're, as far as we know, they're not warping space and time to jump from point A to point B. They're just quite content to get in their little bubbles of water and scoot on over a few, because they're mostly immortal anyway. So
take the scenic route, they don't mind.
There you go. Yeah, that's right. Scenic highway.
We're going to go around to the far side of the moon and check out Mars.
Picnic lunch and yeah. And see, here's the thing too. It's like if that's the case, if it's in any way related to the Nummo, then this is very curious indeed, because the only prophecy that is inherent in any of the religion that's been made by the Dogon around the Nummo, or in the Southeast Pacific Asian island area, where we also find references to the Nummo, the only prophecy about either of those is that Nummo would come back when we were ready to sit and chat. And so it's like, damn.
Back in 2015, I hosted, it was like a 20-hour conference online, and it was called The Untangled Gathering, Looking at the Origins. And we had people come from all over the world to talk about the origins. What's the origin story from their culture? And we had some really great speakers. And I had a friend of mine on who is from the Mohawk Nation. And he gave the story. And the story is just amazing. I'll try and remember to post a link to it with the archive. The story is amazing. I love the story. But that's the whole thing is when their, if you will, God character, I'm loath to use that word, but their main character, when he leaves in his concrete canoe, his cement metal canoe, to go back up to the sky, and he says, at the next passing of the star, we will come back. We will be back again. So that is something that plays out. I mean, of course, you have the Hopi prophecies of so many pieces of that, and that's one of the things that I always go to. And there's got to be something to it. When you have this level on, and it's not just, modern mythology. We're talking deeper and deeper levels of mythology and oral traditions all over the planet, no matter how far apart, so similar.
And separated by time as well.
Massively
We've actually got
separated by time.
some from defunct civilizations where we had a Rosetta Stone and we were able to crack their language, and we get to read Sumerian and read all of this stuff. And if you keep reading in there, of course, what are the Sumerian kings famous for, right? Their fish garb, their scaly suits and their fish head. Yep. Replicating the gods, right? And so they were Nemo aficionados too. And it's really interesting about that. Yeah.
I always find it interesting that the Nemo, and of course you have Nemo.
Yeah.
You have Captain Nemo, and I've been down a rabbit hole this week on Jules Verne. It's just like made my brain go all over the place for about 24 hours. And it's the same thing. What's in a name? The word. We have a continuation of a story. And I can't believe that they're not all tied in when we have these continuations of sound and words in linguistic twists that just keep repeating throughout history in a different story, and maybe even in a different culture, yet it just keeps repeating.
The idea, though, we have to either deal with or discard the concept of original source material. Yeah. So if for instance we're all remnants culturally of one vast Atlantis kind of culture, then you would expect to see the replication as each culture became more and more isolated. You would see the core mythology stay the same at its story level, but be altered in the individual language around it. Whereas they may, the islanders may have used in the past might have used references to mainland sort of terms that would then fall away over time because they didn't have contact with the mainland. And now you have NASA saying, and not even just NASA, but a lot of the military industrial complex and the space guys are all saying that we're basically a cargo cult. Okay, that about cargo cults?
Define that for me, please.
World War II, in the Pacific theater of operations, it was necessary for the United States to supply forward operating bases, including spies and all of this, to watch out for the Japanese. And so they had these very brave pilots and people that would fly into just incredibly rough terrain, such as Papua New Guinea, or such as the islands in New Guinea and so on, cut in really crude landing strips, and they would land there. And in order to get permission to continue to do this, to supply their people, they basically gave the indigenous population things. And so every time a plane landed, the indigenous population would arrive and things would be given to them. And then this went on for the course of years. And then one day the war ended and the cargo planes did not come back and no more things were given to the indigenous population. And some of them turned to making replica airplanes out of bamboo that were full-scale models of the planes they had seen, in a hope of enticing the gods to come back and bring them more things. All right, so that's where the idea of a cult. Yeah, if you look it up, that's basically what a cargo cult is, right? Because these indigenous populations really didn't, some of them really didn't interact so much with the representatives of the gods that were handing them out things, and just accepted it and then would scurry back into the woods, sort of a deal, right? Others became more civilized, and we have, some level of interaction with the external civilization, and they got sort of the gist of it. But basically, they were still cargo cults, praying for the return of the cargo planes and the goods that they were being given. Yeah. Now, if we look at it that way as a species, there is some truth to that at this point we are all cargo cultists, because so much of our society is based on back-engineered technology that came out of the 1947 crashes. And so to a certain extent, those humans that have that opinion can be forgiven its implications and their view of it, although I don't buy it 100% myself, because I'm of the opinion that we are going to find so much stuff in Antarctica, and may already have done so, that it will make the idea of a cargo cult immaterial because we'll be self-actualizing. Correct.
Second wave. It'll be the second wave. We'll be so preoccupied for the next generation.
Yeah, exactly. No. Next few hundred years.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it's taken us 70 years to integrate from 2 crashed spaceships the primary stuff, the low-hanging fruit. Now the secondary stuff is coming in the form of quantum computing and all of these kinds of devices that are basically outgrowths of the technology that was involved in the 1947 crashes. So we're into the second wave of that. So we might easily be able to mine those 2 crashes for 100 years. So who knows how long we can go on what they're going to find in Antarctica.
Okay, so you opened the Pandora's box, so we're going to go there. You said Antarctica and you said 1947. Mm-hmm. Trigger words, right? So I've done, every time I turn around for years, Antarctica. So I have like this little weather radar. Every time it comes up in the news, it's like, why is that up now? Why is they putting this stupid article that it really says absolutely frickin' nothing new in this moment? Why is that news piece out now? And we've done the research. Like this whole crew that I've got here with the Unfuckers, we've done heavy research into Antarctica. And you look at Admiral Byrd, you have to. And you go through the very difficult process of trying to separate mythology and from the facts that happened, and of course working on limited pieces of information that you have to dig through to get facts. But that year 1947, so we have 47 crashes. We know we got technology that's been reverse engineered from all of that. Now we're back since, I want to say since about 2011, all of a sudden the spotlight is on Antarctica. And it has just gotten bigger and bigger and bigger. And we have, you talked about the disinformationists, and I'm David Wilcox and all that stuff, and there was nothing that made my head explode more than they were going on about this Antarctica stuff, because it's so much disinformation that people don't, they lose.
You block it out.
They block it out. They block it out. They're so inundated with this bullshit that they just block it all out and they put it all together. Anything that's Antarctica goes into this package and we just throw it away. What is going on right now? What is actually going on? I mean, I have a shitload of theories.
Well, we can ascertain some things. We can get some facts by going to NASA and even Google Earth, bringing up maps of Antarctica in sufficient resolution, use the TIFF files, zoom into the coastline, because much of the interior is screened. I mean, it's NASA has altered it, right? They've wiped everything out, made it all look all snowy even when it wasn't. But even so, if you just crawl around the coastline and add it up, you end up with an understanding that there's thousands of people more, perhaps tens of thousands of more people than we anticipate being there. There's a great coastal civilization being built there out of very high-tech looking buildings. There are some really interesting pumping operations, all right? You can see some areas on certain parts of the coast where giant tubes have been built that go down into holes, and because of the angle of the satellite photo, you can't see what's down the hole, but you can see these giant tubes are being used to pump something out and likely air down into it. So wherever you see these things, you know there's some underground stuff going on, and we're not talking ice. At those places, there's snow around, certainly, but these places are on solid rock at giant big fissures or caves or this sort of thing. And you can count about a half a dozen of those. You shouldn't have much trouble finding those. You'll even find, okay, and you'll even find that you find landing strips, and you find lots and lots of airplanes that are in standby mode. Now this, or that are not stashed there, but are idle. And this is interesting because Antarctica is mostly a no-fly zone, and yet there's a lot of airplanes there, big airplanes too, and not the C-130s that are flying from the States to supply people. And mostly they're not doing that anymore. Okay, it used to be that the C-130s took off from McCord Air Force Base up here, and they would fly down to Antarctica to stock everybody up on all of their supplies and so on. Now the space and the people, the civilization down there is so large that they have to do it with lots and lots and lots of ships.
Well,
And so
we
you
have a
see,
friend who's a merchant marine. And last year he made 2 trips to Antarctica, just delivering stuff. And he sent lots and lots of really awesome photos. And one of them is of a huge cave. And he said, like, there's nothing to give you proportion in the photo,
right.
obviously. And he says, you have to understand, this is like as tall as a size skyscraper.
Yeah.
So
yeah, you can drive in and yeah.
Well, my whole thing is I was looking on a completely unrelated topic 2 weeks ago. I'll track flights and I'll track ships. And out of a fluke, my husband says to me, just go take a look around Antarctica. Let's see what's good. There are 2 ships that are sailing around the land. I mean, the radar is showing them in the middle of Antarctica, where it should be just ice and snow and glacier, and we're not,
right.
obviously, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles from the coast. And I said, but if there's these big caves, are they sailing under and they're actually delivering supplies inland?
If you were looking at the AIS system, no. What you would be seeing would be an artifact of the satellite, okay? Because the placement of the satellite wouldn't be able to give you any closer resolution as to where they were once it slipped over a certain position into the 60s or 70s of latitude. In other words, the satellites are up at the bottom of the planet, and so they would be so oblique that anything that was in the South Pole area would basically appear to be right smack in the middle of Antarctica, if you were on that system. If you were looking at some other system, I can't say. But it would seem unlikely. It would seem unlikely that any satellite system could track ships under any kind of obscuring layer like ice or rock or whatever, right? And Antarctica is really odd in terms of the military activity over the years, the nuclear accident that occurred in the 70s, the cleanup that occurred then late in the 70s, and now the new energy systems that are being brought in that may not be nuclear for all we know. And it's also really odd in relation to the escalation of legal civilian activities. Mm-hmm. So 10 years back, you would see, okay, so let's say that, let's step back for something and let's not overlook a major piece in our puzzle. And the major piece in the puzzle is that in the 90s, for whatever reason, but let's presume they knew they would be looking for something, NASA put up a satellite that scans the South Pole. And it doesn't just do it in regular visible light or infrared or ultraviolet, it does it at a magnetic level. And they said that it was going to be, that the satellite was for magnetosphere analysis of the Earth, right?
Yep.
But there's a lot of BS involved in that because the satellite never looks away from Earth. It's only always, and it was a southern pole insertion into an orbit, which was difficult for us to achieve. So they put some considerable effort into it. And it is always scanning down on the continent. I think it went up in 97. I'm not sure. It was 96, 97, or 98. But the upshot of the whole thing is that all of the Antarctica stuff just took off like mad in the year 2002. Okay, and that's when they discovered this magnetic anomaly under the ice. This magnetic anomaly is large. It is continually powered. It is obviously, can be presumed to be a powered source or a power source of some kind because of the way that it disrupts the magnetic influences that the satellite was looking at. And they've been focused on this area and this magnetic anomaly ever since they discovered it in 2002. It is close to, let's call it the border of what had been formerly claimed by Germany, okay, in terms of New Schwabenland and the area that had been marked off. As far as we know, the Germans never penetrated that far into Antarctica. As far as we know, the only reason that there was a border there was because they flew and dropped the little Nazi pennants in order to claim
their land.
Right, exactly. But as far as we know, this was too far inland for the Germans to have penetrated in the 30s and the 40s. But nonetheless, we have Americans, we have British, Russians, and who knows how many other nations that are focused on this.
Chinese are there big time now.
Yeah, on this particular magnetic anomaly and this particular area. yeah, as far as I know, it's under an area that's still under ice. And so that makes it even more interesting because magnetism and ice are not harmonious. And so ice has a tendency to scatter magnetic waves and stuff, right? And so it makes it even more interesting that that this intense magnetic activity can still be tracked from space, even if it's under a mile or more of ice. And so the supposition is that it could be like a nuclear power plant. It could be a power plant of some kind. If it is a power plant, then it has to be, because of the size of the magnetic anomaly, it has to be understood that this is a power plant that could power all of the continent of Antarctica if we were to maximally fill it with humans and plug them into the internet and be running, you know, their Vegematics and all of that. Yeah, exactly. Everything all at once. Yeah. So if it were electrical, it certainly, it alone, if it is a power plant, if it's not natural, if it's an artificial construction, it alone is probably a prize of inestimable value because it's been going under the ice for who knows how long, hasn't apparently melted down or malfunctioned. There's no sign of accident. There's no radiation other than magnetic disturbance coming from it and a heat signature. So I think there's a lot of people that are diligently trying to find their way down to it and to see what the hell this thing is. Now, this also brings up another issue. There have been a number of people recently that have been damaged in Antarctica and had to be removed. Mm-hmm. The supposition by a great number of people has been that it was some form of mycotoxin, some form of bacteria, virus, something like this. I'm of the opinion that we should not eliminate the idea that it was energetic. And so maybe scientists...
First supposition. My first supposition immediately was that, no, we're talking an energetic, a field of some type that just, with some people, it just twitched them off or on.
Well, or maybe they just got too close to it. So, you know, if it were a power plant, one could expect to find distribution centers. Maybe these guys dug down far enough that they found such a distribution center and said, hey, let's jab it with a screwdriver and see what happens.
They were digging away and they hit the power cord and it didn't go well.
Right. So Antarctica is very interesting and very hot, so to speak, now. It's magnetically active. There's a lot of human activity. The military is down there even more than before, but they're allowing more of a civilian population in. Although I guess the criteria that are being exercised are quite stringent. I know of a couple of people, and I can't betray very much about them or get them into trouble. And so, but not very many people are discussing what they're doing down there. No one in any of the special access projects has said diddly squat to anybody, including Corey Good. So nobody knows what these people are doing, but we do know that there's some very large special access compartmentalized players that are in place down there, including Leidos, which is the recast center of what used to be called SAIC. And so this very large mega corporation that's always been involved in UFOs and back engineering and all of this kind of stuff gets such a bug up its butt about the Antarctica stuff that it takes its core scientific component and splits that off in order to compartmentalize it so it doesn't get spread out the knowledge into the rest of the company. Then it sets the rest of the company free, incorporates Leidos as its own little critter, and then instantly it's given special access projects in Antarctica to do, and whoosh, it's like mad down there in Antarctica doing stuff that it doesn't have to tell anybody about. So that's going on. We have these individuals that are being made ill by whatever it is they're experiencing, including John Glenn.
And we have all of these big wigs, the big names, who are all of a sudden deciding, oh, I'm just going to go visit the penguins.
Like, exactly. Got to go down and pray to the penguin god. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been watching this and I was taking notes and I've been doing research. And, for example, just a month after Mandela's funeral, which of course was right down there at the very, how convenient to have all the world leaders, right? Just a hopper flight from Antarctica. Prince Harry was in Antarctica with a bunch of wounded warrior doing a track.
Bullshit.
It's been a continuous stream of dignitaries. We're talking
and bizarre
serious
ones.
Dignitaries.
Yeah, popes and such. Yeah.
Making visits to the penguins.
Yeah.
Gonna go check out our scientists down there. Yeah, because
Yeah, we got to see
lots about
what
science.
ice is like, because we got global warming coming and we want to be able to remember it.
Okay, so my question is this: the neutrino, the ice cube, CERN's ice cube with the neutrino observatory, because that for me just kind of appeared out of nowhere. I've been watching CERN pretty fucking closely since 2013. All of that kind of aspect. And then all of a sudden, when I really started digging into Antarctica again in 2015, there's this 1 kilometer tall freaking neutrino. And it's like, what are you doing there? And
exactly. Now let's also...
you read what they're supposedly doing, and you're like,
Yeah, sure.
Because you built a 1 kilometer tall, wide cube to do, it's like CERN spending $21,000 a second to run a particle collider to find the Higgs boson.
yeah, like that's useful. I need to have 2 of those in my wallet at least.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Let's also look at it another way. Go back to the UNet, all right? Because neutrinos are very interesting. They're on the top 3 of my potential target particles. I have 3 candidates. And guess what else is happening, okay? In the United States, we've got big holes that are neutrino capturers, all right? We've got these in old mines. And also recently, so has Japan.
Yes,
Japan's been hot on neutrinos. So the neutrinos were in the top 3, as I say, of my potential particles to be entrained for the universal internet. And so if that were the case, well, one thing you'd want to do is to capture some of the buggers, put them in a little can so you can shake them up as you need to and decode them as they're doing stuff. And interesting that CERN is hot on that. CERN is really an interesting thing. They gave us the HTML, they gave us a lot of the protocol understanding and technology that we've got on the internet now that runs this particular software, for instance. And yet they're also running the largest machine ever, producing more electricity than we've ever had on the planet. And they're
bigger magnetic fields by
than the planet produces
thousands of times of what our entire planet gives off. But they're just studying some little physics things. They're just looking for
water. Sure. Yeah, so they can hand out Higgs boson particles to people. Yeah. Sure. Makes a lot of sense.
They're putting glass and look what I got. I went to
and they're sparkly.
All I got was this little sparkly thing.
Right. But in the meantime, you and your children have been mortgaged to the hilt to help pay for this thing for the next 100 years.
Well, I've looked at CERN from every angle. As everyone does, when you go down that rabbit hole, you look at and you start tying, what the fuck are they actually doing there? And so, I literally have, and I spent days upon days and hours watching I actually found myself a backdoor hack. So I wasn't seeing the live stream that they were showing. I actually had a backdoor where I could look in and see a lot of other stuff that was going on. I don't even know how I stumbled upon it. It was basically just clicking buttons in their system until I finally got somewhere. And I got to the point where I could watch, and I would call out the bullshit. I'd do news shows and call out and say, CERN said they did this, but look, here's the live, and they're still operating, so don't tell me. But there's more. There's so much more to this. When you look at the power that is being used and being generated, this story just doesn't hold even a drop of water. And then you brought up quantum computers. And the same thing, I've talked about D-Wave since I first kind of fell down that rabbit hole and gone. And a group of us together, like Randy was in on the discussion, and Jeff Gates and I said, well, okay, what if, we know they like to do things in triplicate. Like, I don't know, 3 seems to be one of their numbers they kind of like. What if CERN is the power, it's the generator, it is the thing that blows open the door, if you will. And D-Wave is what reaches through the breach dimensionally. And what if what we're calling now blockchain or mining, let's call it mining, Bitcoin mining, is the actual gathering of the pieces of what has been pulled through from the other side. whether it's data, whether it is, I don't know.
No, you've got a bunch of stuff that it doesn't.
Okay, good. Let's throw this out.
Connect.
Let's
Doesn't
talk
connect.
about this.
The blockchain is simple open source code. It's a bunch of programs for each blockchain. The mining of the blockchain is akin to running Quicken books. It's a ledger. It just simply adds stuff together. All right, it doesn't connect into anything. Doesn't connect to the internet per se. It's on its own protocol. And the idea that there would be, and then you go back to D-Wave. D-Wave guys are interesting in what they've been able to achieve, but the understanding that's been promulgated by their head PR guys about all of this interdimensional, about all this interdimensional stuff is just bogus. All right, it's a
okay, so,
he's a money guy.
Let's clarify this.
He's a money guy, so he doesn't know.
One. This is a really big piece that a lot of people have been distracted by. I spent months distracted by this and tearing apart everything I could to try and find out more information when I'm not a computer programmer. That's not easy. So yeah, let's clarify this.
Okay, so
what can they do and can't they do?
All right, so here's what a quantum computer is. They take computer chips that are just like any other computer chip, except they have a special function in them. Yeah. All right, they are both and, not either or, and so they're a different kind of device. So they can have three states, not just merely two, not merely on and off. They can have always on, always off, and then uncertain. You know, it's uncertain until you look at it. They take these, they stick them into a stainless steel can, they seal that can, they pump all of the air out of that can. Right. Nothing thereafter ever touches those chips. Those chips are in no way connected to any damn wires or anything. They're just suspended inside this air evacuated can. That can is suspended underneath a device that runs microwave broadcast and receiving units and has them hover around the outside edge of that can. And it has these microwaves tuned. Each tuned microwave goes to a single Q chip, a single qubit they call it. Again, they don't touch the can. They communicate to the chips only once, really, each time it's run, and they only communicate to look at the data. And as soon as they look at the data, it's destroyed. But they've had an image of it that they then laboriously, because this is an analog process, they then laboriously get it up into a digital machine to display it on the display that you've got and into your software program. But so those chips are reacting to the quantum flux. Okay, they're not going into interdimensional kind of stuff. And in fact, the D-Wave guys go to huge amounts of trouble, giant amounts of trouble, to make sure that there's no no kind of interdimensional cross pollution. So they pump out all of the air so that you don't have any randomly oscillating air molecules inside that can. Right. They then freeze that can down to near absolute zero, so that if there is anything in there, as well as the molecules in the can itself, are not vibrating. Right. Such that they're able to get closer and closer and closer to the quantum flux. So the idea that the D-Wave computers could bring anything over from another dimension is absurd, because they never touch that dimension, and the only time they're read, the only time that the qubits are active, is when the microwave pulses out at them to get a picture of their current state, which is then translated through this process into your quantum computing software. And the reason that it's beautiful stuff and it's cool is because of that third state of potential. You can use arrays of qubits to represent, or to have an actual consensus chip register that contains all states all at once. And you write a chunk of code, they flash that chip to see what state it is in at the time that code executes, and 8 out of 10 times it's the solution to your problem. But there's no data transfer that occurs between us and any other dimension at all. And anytime people bring up the idea of dimensions in this sort of a context, it brings a context, a connotation in people's minds of old TV kind of stuff where you could have a dimensional rift and step through it, right? Yes. And it doesn't work that way. So the other dimensions we have, they're around us continuously, and we know they exist. Ultraviolet, infrared, X-rays, gamma rays, all of these things we cannot see because our senses don't present this to us. So there's no way we're going to turn ourselves into an X-ray being and step into the X-ray dimension. We're also not going to turn into an infrared being and or an electric being and step into those dimensions either. Nor is there cogent cognitive capabilities in those dimensions that we could extract anything from. So what we're rather doing with these qubits is taking a dynamic read off of the state of universe and representing it in this level of uncertainty, because is it on, is it off, or is it both?
Or is it both? Okay,
correct.
Now, here's the thing. So, because I fundamentally get that, and we go back to the use of words, and the word is dimensions, and this is such one of those fucking words that when you try to, everyone has their own definition. And you get, you have your science fiction definition, like you say, where the doorway opens and you cross over into the other. So it is a very difficult, English is a really difficult conversation to have in a lot of ways, because we just have words that have too many meanings and are too open to perception and bias, right? But we talked about quantum entanglement, and we talked about, especially what you were just saying with the quantum computers, it's on, it's off, it's both. Could there possibly be, in a way, and maybe that's the better way of explaining it, is that through quantum entanglement, that these particles, how do you bring that into English? Open the ability, if you will. It opens the fact that there's this, and there's both. And then the choice is made. And we look at the observer, the concept of in quantum stuff with talking about the observer. Is there a way that quantum entanglement could be used, even like what we were talking about with this universal internet?
Sure.
That they could be passing information from one place to another place in a way that we cannot maybe define. Like I said, I'm trying not to use the word dimension. And I'm trying
sure. I understand what you're saying. Yeah, I get it, right? But here's our fundamental problem. In spite of the protestations to the contrary, there is only here, and there's only the ever-present now. From a thought experiment based on the idea of this, what I call the little bloop theory, also called
we're going to get into that too.
Okay, but also called refined string theory by some people. But from that concept, there's only this one universe, only this one instance of it. And so we could conceptually be drawing in information from Sirius or from the Pleiades or from Antares, but from another dimension, no. From another universe, no. Because the multiverse, insofar as our conceptualizing it here on Earth, doesn't exist. We have certain thought experiments and certain actual experiments relative to how humans can muck about with time that basically establish that the little bloop theory is correct and that the pulse is correct. The pulse is also conceptually at the heart of the Sikh religion. It's at the heart of the Jain religion, both of which have ties to Sanskrit. There are discussions of this kind of a concept within Sanskrit. And the ideas are multivaried, but they don't include the idea of a multiverse because of the nature of the pulse that is working out of consciousness. So consciousness is, period. It just is. It can't be altered. It can't be, so you're never going to have an altered consciousness. You're never going to have an enhanced consciousness. You're never going to expand your consciousness. You can expand your awareness, alter your awareness, and alter your mind's ability to be aware of consciousness, but you can't alter the underlying consciousness. Consciousness actually forms the pulse itself. The pulse forms complexity. The complexity of energy forms matter in an Einsteinian kind of E equals MC sort of a thing. And Bob's your uncle, we've got a universe. But we've only got one of them. And the pulse, even though it is infinitely variable and infinitely complex, it is within a expanding infinitely, but closed conceptually system. And so there are no other universes that are also expanding within a space we can't get at. And the reason that we know that this exists this way is because of the nature of the little bloops themselves, the appearance of hydrogen ions all throughout the universe. and that all atoms spin, and yet consciousness directed by human beings can be used to alter the spin of atoms and the flow of time in a very narrow focused locality kind of thing. But because we can do that, it proves that there's no past that's available for us to go into. It also proves that the future is continually self-forming just ahead of our ability to conceptualize it. And it also proves that there's no other space. This is because when the pulse crosses itself infinitely to get very complex and it creates a hydrogen atom, the hydrogen atom doesn't push its way into space. It comes in and brings its space with it, that it needs to exist. It also brings the time that it needs to exist with it. And those both merge into the universe of time and space, leaving the hydrogen atom in that merged surrounding environment or bubble. But in fact, the hydrogen atom, and it can be proven, does not actually ever touch any other atoms. None of the atoms in our body ever actually touch. We can't actually touch another atom. We don't even really touch the atmosphere. There's always a layer of gases that are right on our surface of our skin that are sort of adhered to our skin that are actually the layer that is touching the atmosphere, and on and on and on. So you get really interesting to discuss it, but all of these things go to the idea that this is the reality, and multiverses and this other stuff don't exist. Our own reality is weird enough, and we don't have a concept of how weird it is, right? Anything we can conceive of is way too mild.
Vaguest notion about
right. We all have a few hints.
Okay, so you just said, okay, this little piece you just said about hydrogen atoms don't touch.
Right.
Is really interesting because when CERN was doing a major experiment in, it would have been September, October of 2016, they started crashing hydrogen atoms together, and they were, and I could never get, like, you read all the documents and the same thing, you go, okay, your explanations mean jack shit. What are they actually doing? And there was something that just triggered me of like, they're deliberately smashing hydrogen together. What is the effect they are trying to come up with? What is the why?
The speculation I have about those experiments that they ran. Okay, so, all right, let me back up. Some of the stuff that CERN's doing could be interpreted as being a large hadron collider, could be interpreted as being like time travel sort of goal, right?
Yeah.
But that aside, those specific elements aside, it would appear that some of their experiments were designed to create complexity, not reveal it. Okay, so a lot of their experiments are that they're going to get these two particles whizzing around and then collide them to see all of these other particles that would come from that collision. So they're trying to reveal complexity as the stuff bursts apart and you can see each thing individually, right? And they have special cameras and gear that is intended to grab these things at very fast rates such that they can examine them because their entire existence is less than a millisecond, that sort of thing, before they fade out. So obviously they're mucking about with stuff at the edge of the creation of reality. Now, another way you could go on this would be that you could, if you wanted to, decide, okay, let's build stuff. So let's, instead of trying to reveal complexity, let's try to make the pulse really complex by shoving all this stuff together to make the pulse recreated in this new complex form. But in order to do that, you've got to get through the space and time barrier that's around each and all of the molecules. And so that's when it gets really interesting. And I think the hydrogen experiments were an attempt to see if they could, for instance, use the energy at their disposal to create element 115. Now, I think that they're after element 115 because of its ability to be used to warp space and time, and because of its potential.
Theoretically.
Well, no. Okay, no, anecdotally or reportedly, all right? It's not a theory because we have people reporting that there's reverse engineering going on, that it was centered around element 115, which we didn't even know about. And then 10 years later, we discover element 115 in other solar systems through refractory spectroanalysis. So we know the element actually exists. And so there's not theory about that. It's a report about it, because I haven't read any theories that said if you could create element 115 and whiz a particle around it of this size, this close to it, my theory is that you would be able to jump space and time. Rather, we have, instead of a theory, we have reporting. We have people saying, I worked on on a spaceship teardown. We got a bunch of people, they tore down this thing, and it's a little mini particle accelerator, and it accelerates a particle up this tube through a short tuned tube to a lump of element 115, and Bob's your uncle, there you go, your spaceship's over in the Pleiades. Once it whips around, it causes a time distortion, which is perfectly in line with this Russian scientist, Kozyrev, who did all these experiments on time, and he was an astrophysicist of some real note, got bound up in the Soviet Union politics, went to the Gulag, had a lot of time to think, came out, did a lot of experiments about time, and some of the things he discussed would go to the same space as the engineers that are saying they worked on reverse engineering these power plants, and at the core of the power plants was a stationary lump of element 115 and the ability to shoot little particles at it. And Kozyrev would have said, oh, of course, that's for this effect that can be created in distorting the ever-present now. And see, this is why it's necessary that we think about this in a specific way. That's why I use this language, the ever-present now. Yeah. So you and I are doing things in the ever-present now around a sphere, independent of our time zone. And this ever-present now also exists around our moon. This ever-present now is throughout our entire solar system and throughout the entire universe. And so there are now things going on among those trillion times 4 trillion species that are within our ever-present now, and we're totally unaware of them, right? But the ever-present now is let's think of it as a thin barrier or a thin layer, not a barrier, but like a cling film, okay? And this cling film is over our consciousness, our awareness of our consciousness. And if we can do certain things with element 115, that just because of the nature of that molecule and the energies that occur when you pass another molecule or another ion right over it, you get a situation where you can take that cling film and momentarily disrupt it and then put it back together again. And when you do this, you find that you've been able to move through space. And you've been able to move, well, you've been able to move through space, but you've been able to move outside of time because you're not moving space per se. All right, space is universal.
So when you're outside of time, then you're not in the moment of now.
Correct. You're in the moment of the void. Okay, so here's how it works. There's a pulse that creates me 22 trillion times a second.
Yes,
there's a void that destroys me. Right, a void that destroys me 22 trillion times a second. And thus my mind is able to manage the idea of motion. Very much like stop and go motion inside a movie picture. If you just slow it down enough, you see it that way, right? Only this is at 22 trillion times a second. So we'll never ever be able to slow it down enough to be able to see the individual frames. Our closest attempt is through meditation, which is reaching into consciousness, which is trying to seek into the void. The void destroys us 22 trillion times a second, destroys all of universe 22 trillion times a second. The pulse recreates us in that period of time. And thus from there, all of our thinking needs to leap from that point forward. Now, when the complexity of the pulse increases to the point where there's a dense enough layer, it creates hydrogen. And that's the little bloop that comes into the universe. It's constantly creating hydrogen ions as fast as it can, and it's also constantly creating all of the other molecules in the universe and creating more and new complex molecules and new forms of complexity in the universe, because that's what the pulse does. It continually crashes over itself, getting more and more complex until it plops out matter. When it plops out the matter, there are certain conditions that exist. That matter is spinning. So every atom in our body spins. We get no rest in this universe at all, ever, even asleep, because our bodies are continually in a state of motion, no matter what. Blood's pumping, lymphs moving, all of this kind of stuff, all the organs and all of these kind of things never ceases. This is a side effect of the pulse recreating us 22 trillion times a second, is that we have all this energy that's occurring all the time. Now, when this happens, time and space come in with each of those molecules. Space merges into all of the other space around it. And so space is locally aggregated, universally available, okay? When time comes in with each of the molecules, time merges with all of the other time in the universe. So time is universally aggregated. The same ever-present now exists everywhere. But it's locally malleable. All right. So we can't, for instance, space is the reverse. So we could distort space some distance away from us with a nuclear bomb, right? But there's not much we can do to alter the space between here and the stairs, that kind of thing. We can't really alter it at a local level. But we can alter
using a nuclear bomb.
Correct. And basically we're altering the universe to get at that local space. Time is different. We can alter time locally without much in the way of energy. I can give you a dozen different experiments out of Kozyrev's book and a bunch I've thought of that prove that this is the case. And because we're able to do that, time we know to be malleable at a local level, and yet universally constant.
It's still constant.
Correct. And self-healing. Both of these are self-healing systems.
Now, you did a series of interviews with Randy and Emily on Off Planet Radio, all about time. And the bloop, the $22 trillion, oh, well, that's going to lead into where I'm going with this, but the 22 trillion pulse per second bloop. And again, I'll put it in the archive. This is a must listen to series of shows. It is seriously incredible. So we have CERN crashing hydrogen.
Right.
And we talk about the bloop, and we talk about that pulse. Are they trying to alter the pulse? Are they trying to alter the frequency, if you will? And I'm going somewhere with this, so I would agree.
I would agree with that. You're right. I would agree with that. I think that the nutty fuckers that run CERN, that is indeed their understanding that they would have that capability, and that but they're probably conceptualizing it in the level of interdimensional access, portals to other dimensions, time travel, all of this sort of thing. But I would agree with you that at their core, that's really probably what they're thinking of, and that's what they're attempting to do. And that may be the kind of thing that ends up with, the Norway spiral, that sort of thing. Yeah, hang on a second. Let me,
yes.
I've got to take off this sweatshirt. It's getting a little hot here. Hang on.
Okay.
That's me.
Okay.
Okay, so we've looked at CERN, okay, and we looked at it, let's say, from that aspect. Crashing particles, CERN's doing this. The scientific piece is over here. We had the big article that came out a couple of months ago, and it sent me down a rabbit hole of collecting some information because the numbers. I don't do numerology. I've never been really a big person involved in numerology, but I know that the quintessential they are very big on numerology. So I watch it. I watch the numbers when they come up. So we had the report that came out, Catherine Austin Fitz and a few others. $21 trillion is missing from the Department of Defense and the Department of Urban Housing, which you just go, okay, if there was two that you'd go not put together, that was the mind fucked me, which led me down the thing about, is it all gone to what? Antarctica? Department of Urban Housing, all of a sudden they got to build all this black ops housing in Antarctica. You got to house these people. And of course, Department of Defense with their 4,400 missing soldiers missing. We just don't really know where they are.
Right. We just lost them.
We just lost
them. They'll turn up. We just got to root around.
We keep paying them, but we've lost them somehow.
Right.
So that rang a lot of bells for me. And I said, because it was 21 trillion, and because I do news shows, I keep a lot of numbers and shit in my head. So I went through and I took a look at the last few years. I want to read you a couple of headlines. So keeping that one in mind,
sure.
Okay? Okay, so right after that, we have the Senate GOP tax bill would add $1 trillion to the debt. The current U.S. debt stands at $20 trillion, adding $1 trillion, making it $21 trillion. How much has disappeared unaccountable by DOD and the Department of Housing and Urban Development? $21 trillion. Now we have the big statement by McAfee saying Bitcoin is going to reach $1 million each by 2020, bringing the total value of 21 million mineable coins to $21 trillion in value. Article 2015, super rich hide 21 trillion offshore. With $21 trillion, China's savers are set to change the world. Central bank assets jumped the fastest in 5 years to 21 trillion. The war on poverty, $21 trillion later. Big banks manipulate $21 trillion market for credit default swaps. China is posed to unleash $21 trillion to be invested outside of their borders. The 21st century U.S. $21 trillion infrastructure project. Ex-Goldman exec uses cloud to upend $21 trillion market payment system. Estimated total of around 21 trillion gallons of water fell during Hurricane Harvey. Okay, 21 trillion, 21 trillion, 21 trillion. I mean, literally, when you sit there and you go, I don't believe in coincidence.
Well, go back one, too. There's one more that they're not even talking about in there that won't show up. And that is that my 21 trillion comes from the number of hydrogen ions that would be found in this particular container as a result of this thing called Avogadro's number, which is used to determine the gram molecular weight of any given substance. And so that's where 21 trillion comes into at the hydrogen level. If you had a container of a specific size and you did this experiment, you would end up with 21 trillion hydrogen atoms or ions.
Okay, so we know what resonant frequency is. Now, every energy is a frequency. Every energy has a frequency, if you will. So if we talk about a loop that is 22 trillion pulses per second, and they're pushing this number 21, 21, 21, 21 trillion, and it's not just 21, but 21 trillion. Are they trying to set up some kind of a resonant frequency to be able to oscillate the 22 down into 21? And
okay, well, the 22 is actually, I round up. Okay, Avogadro's number is where I get that number from. Okay, so it's not 21 trillion exact, and it's not 22 trillion. It is between those two numbers when you actually do the calculations, right? Because Avogadro's number is 6 point something up raised up to a power, and then my calculations for this takes that number, escalates it 3 orders of magnitude, and multiplies it by 3, and you end up with the 21 trillion and some number almost at 22 trillion. I just round up.
So I don't believe in coincidence. When I keep hearing this number repeated, now people would say, oh, the universe is telling us something. The universe is telling us something. Great, it's a lovely thing.
But what the hell is it?
But what is it? And when you time, like with this little piece that you just gave us about the whole thing with the hydrogen, and we are literally talking about hydrogen, and we're talking about the most prolific molecule, if you will, in the known universe. I won't say the universe because we don't know jack shit about what's really past the moon. So what are they doing?
That's speculation about intent. Yeah, I agree with you there. I agree with you there that coincidence is it's a Buddhist punchline in a joke. That's all it is, right? But so something is going on. The meme is certainly coming out from universe in a large number of ways, and as of this point, I don't have anything to peg it to, and I don't usually speculate as to why people do things because it goes to intent, and these are some pretty squirrely bastards that are on the other side of things, and so I don't know how their minds think, and so I couldn't really speculate about their intent, but we do know that they are indeed doing these kind of things such that these numbers are existent. And they could have said, 19 trillion gallons of water out of the hurricane. Would we have known different? No. They could have said 57 trillion. Would we have known different?
No. And they could have said even the thing,
now if you want to get really
Department of Defense and all that, they could have said it was actually 21 trillion 500. Yeah,
exactly, and 67 cents. Yeah, exactly. Right. But see, here's the thing about that. Now, if we were to, so we don't have any concept of what's going on, and so we turn to, because we have pattern matching minds, we turn to those tools that are available to us. One of them actually could be numerology, because we know these guys are squirrely and they follow these symbols like,
like glue.
They really need to, right? And within numerology, we find some very interesting things about 22 and 21. 22 being the number of enlightenment, and 21 being the moment before completion. And so those are, and so 22 is not considered to be twice 11. 22 is, in numerologically, is considered to be its own unique occurrence or frequency, so to speak. And 21 is seen as the moment before completion in some of the more ancient numerological systems. And so are they saying basically this is the moment before disclosure? Is this the moment before the storm breaks? Is this the moment of XYZ occurring? And they cannot help. It could be that they can't help themselves, and they express it that way. It also could be that they're sending coded messages back and forth to each other, or they're attempting to pre-plant the ideas in our heads because they can suck more energy out of the system as a whole if they do that.
And that's and literally everything you've just said is absolutely reasonable given everything that we've seen. I've talked about, I wrote a series of articles back in 2014-15 about the templates. Basically they run on templates. And it seemingly, by observation, they cannot break their templates. It's like they do it this way. This is the way they do things. They never ever change it. And if you can discover the if you can look through what's going on, see the template they're using, then you can go, oh, okay, I know what template this is. And it goes from anything from false flag attacks to political agendas to everything. You watch, you find the template, and you've got it, because they just are incapable, seemingly, of being able to do anything original.
They're not very smart, in my opinion. They're very clever, but they're hidebound by ritual and by fear about stepping outside the ritual. And, it's kind of like, as you say, we've seen this movie before. We can guess what the end's going to be, right? That sort of thing. So I would agree with you that they are, they're trapped and unable to think themselves out of the situation in which they find themselves. They get a certain amount of success with actions, and then they ritualize those actions because of the success and because of the nature of the clever mind. So in other words, a clever mind rather than a smart mind. A clever mind is somebody...
The clever mind versus the creative mind, because that's
correct. Smart is immaterial.
Us peons, us the plebeians down here, we're the creative ones.
Correct.
Who bust through their ritual, who bust through their plans and their motions that get put into place. And because they're just clever, they just keep recycling the same old shtick and are incapable.
We have metrics to that as well. If I've done an analysis, and I did it for some parties, and I won't say who, but I was paid to do it in the 90s, and I did an analysis of patent filings in a number of countries. And you'll find that none of the patents filed in the last 100+ years within any system that was English language based, patent office in Britain, Canada, US, and even to a certain extent Switzerland, none of these patents that have been issued, okay, let me put it this way. It is true that not a measurable percentage of all of the patents issued have been issued to people we would consider to be the ruling elite. So these guys never come up with original thoughts. They never come up with original inventions. Their names are on patents due to corporate associations, but they're not particularly...
They paid out the moolah.
Correct, but they didn't invent it. They acquire it at some level, and then they end up getting it patented under their name, but they don't actually create the stuff. So we have demonstrable evidence of certain things in reality. And one of these are that, nobody out of the royals in the British or in all of the in any of the European system, any of the Japanese system, or the English system, none of these royals have ever been creative thinkers. And in fact, we see that these people are usually demented minds. Look how many of Queen Elizabeth's siblings are in mental institutions and never seen. And all of the situation with the inbreeding.
The entire history. And it's, like you say, it's not just the British royal family.
It's all of them.
It's all of them, because they've done nothing but inbreed
Right. But they're very clever about staying alive. Okay. They're very clever about power. They're very clever about following these rituals that maintain their power. The rituals include, killing one person in order to silence 12 just out of fear, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And they have all these effective systems that up until recently have sort of worked for them. They're not aware of, and they resist change, and they've done a great deal towards trying to freeze things so that we would not move into a period of change that they were unable to dominate. And that's actually what's occurring, is that we're moving into a period of time where the ruling elite will be flattened in and subsumed by humanity. As some of the people are saying, they'll be drowned in our urine. And so these guys just, they're going to be disappearing over the course of these next 40 or 50 years. Such that we won't even really reference them other than, oh yeah, that lunatic that claims to be related to, and be the Queen of England, that kind of thing. One of a dozen people claiming it in 20 years from now. And nobody cares, right? Because the whole structure is gone by then and it's totally changed. Yeah. Exactly. So yeah, whatever, enjoy your delusion, have fun, right? But we're not going to bow down and buy you horses.
Yeah. We're not going to buy you horses. We're not going to buy you anything other than a 6-foot hole. But we won't go there. This is the entire subject. When you get into this one, is so vast, and there's so many little tiny pieces of it, like little fractals that we put together like a 3D jigsaw puzzle. I want to ask you a couple of questions. I want to switch gears a little bit. We brought up the 21 trillion, and I brought up the Bitcoin. The fact of, like I said, 21 million times a million equals 21 trillion. And the question I had, because the question I've had for a long time when it comes to Bitcoin specifically, is it a controlled thing? Or if it wasn't created initially, has it been co-opted to become their new financial system?
They're trying to piggyback on it. They want it to be their new toy, and they are clever but stupid, and so they just don't get it. Satoshi was not very clever, but he was incredibly brilliant and creative, and we have a solution around the fiat system and the banks. They're not able to control it in spite of everything that they're doing. It can't be taken over. It's not part of any AI system. It's QuickBooks. It's a ledger. It's an addition and a subtraction. It can't even do a loop inside the Bitcoin language, and they were smart in doing that because it eliminates this huge amount of attack surface within the software, so it can't even be cracked that way. They were really, really, really smart in putting Bitcoin together. It'll keep going for a long time, and there will be attempts. Well, look, we actually have legitimate banksters attempting to take over and control coins, and what are they doing? They're creating Ripple and Stellar. And both of these are like really pissy kinds of code, and they're just harvest and pump and dump schemes for the banksters, but they're not really impacting the cryptocurrency space at all. And the cryptocurrency space was created by techies that wanted to achieve social engineering and political change with software, and we're seeing it, and they cannot be denied. There has been political change. There has been social engineering resulting from the introduction of this software.
Absolutely. And I think I poorly phrased what I was trying to get to, and that was the fact of we know that everything fiat, all this system, this financial system is a debt-based system. It is nothing but a debt-based system. That's what we currently operate in this fiat system. Are they trying to, as you said, piggyback a way of buying out of the debt system by creating their own crypto, whether they're going to try and use Bitcoin, which I don't think is going to be possible, but whether they're going to try and use Bitcoin or like their own Ripple or one of these, are they trying to buy their way out because they have to somehow delete, make vanish this 21 trillion in debt? No, I would say perceived debt, because is it really debt? Who owns the debt? Which brings in the next bigger question too, like, then who actually owns this fucking debt of $21 trillion, right?
Right.
Is that what they're doing? Are we seeing an attempt with so many countries talking about coming out with their cryptocurrencies? And I'm sorry, I so don't trust the U.S. Fed. I watch everything they're doing right now and go, are they trying to figure out a way to be able to balance? And that was the thing that struck me with the McAfee and the thing with the 21 trillion. Here's this missing money, this debt. And then over here, we have a perceived value. Are they trying to piggyback it in a way?
They're not. My use of that word piggyback is taken in a different context. No, okay. I don't think there's any coordinated, cohesive design towards what you're describing. It's also more than 21 trillion or 21 million coins that will come out. It's not an exact number. And so we just round down in this case because it's not above 21 and a half. It's done on an algorithm and it'll just sort of trail off, and then the hash will become so difficult it might take us years to mine that next block, and then another dozen years for the block after that sort of thing. So, I actually see that the piggyback is a natural outgrowth of these individuals being clever, very dedicated to their own survival, and acting as such individuals would, which is to say at an individual level rather than a group level when the underlying system that used to support the group is no longer tenable. So we go to the postulate that the financial system globally is breaking down under the load of all of the debt. The fiat has grown the debt to the quadrillions of levels. And our 21 trillion is trivial, by the way, to the derivatives that are outstanding. There are quadrillions
that is a pin drop. That's an official number. Correct. That's an officially notated number.
In a little tiny bit of an area too, which is the United States. So there's quadrillions that are done and are also that's our quote government debt, and it doesn't take into account personal debt or corporate debt. So when you look at that, the number is hugely inflated beyond that. So the 21 trillion is perhaps a synchronicity from universe, but it is not a design plan in that sense. And having Bitcoin be at 21 trillion at some point does not in any way alleviate or balance out their debt issues. Rather, in my analysis, what's going on is this, and it sort of makes sense, right? It's enlightened self-interest. So you're a very smart gang leader, and I work for your criminal gang. All right, this is a hypothesis, or this is a little thought experiment here. I see that things are going along great, and we're doing really great, and our gang's growing, and we're stealing a lot, we're getting very rich. And then we run into a period of time when we just can't steal enough to maintain that level of wealth effect within the gang because the underlying populace can't support that much theft. They just don't have as much because we've stolen it all.
Left.
Right. We've stolen it all. At that point, my individual personal survival kicks in, and I'm no longer loyal to the gang. I'm looking to watch out for myself as an individual criminal, because I know for sure, because of the way I think as a criminal, that all the other criminals in the gang are also thinking that way. We're also all operating on the same frequency, so we're all looking for our own exit strategy. And so when I use the word piggyback, I was talking about the idea of as a gang member, working for a bank, I've got all these bonuses, I've got my cocaine and all this other money and all this kind of stuff, and I'm doing really well, but I want to preserve it. So I know the fiat system's coming unglued. I know the paper dollars aren't worth saving in because they're creating those at whim, and they can continue to create them at whim, and their goal is to steal at least 2% of the value every year through what they call inflation. So as a criminal, I want to store my wealth so that when the whole thing collapses and the gang's gone, I can come back out of hiding and resume a nice, comfortable life.
And
so what do I do?
Stealing whatever.
Correct. And so what do? I put my wealth, I take it out of the fiat currencies and I put it into those things that traditionally have helped criminals throughout history: gold, silver, and now the idea that I can put some of it into Bitcoin. So yes, Bitcoin is being used to launder money. I won't deny that. But it's the banks that are laundering the money into Bitcoin, not the people that use Bitcoin. But here's their problem.
It's not the drug lords.
No. There is not enough
Bank
volume.
Of America and Jamie Dimon.
Right. Well, speaking of that, okay, the amount of money laundering done in a single hour through the banking system is a larger volume than we have in Bitcoin itself as a currency. So Bitcoin could not absorb a day's worth of drug money, for instance, right? And so here's their problem. As bad guys, they don't want to tell the other bad guys they're buying Bitcoin to save their wealth. And so they want to be sneaky about it, because if all the bad guys start rushing out to buy Bitcoin, what happens? Price of Bitcoin goes through the roof, right?
Kind of like it did in December, you mean?
Yes, like it'll do again this year.
At the end of the fiscal year?
No. At the end of the fiscal year that really matters is September.
I know.
Okay, that's for the federal government. But yes, but your point is well taken. And a lot of it had to do, the reason we're in a slump at the moment has to do with having to cash back into fiat to pay taxes so that the other gang members don't kill you, or come and take your stuff, right? It's the tribute that I have to pay as a gang member to the central gang leader. And so these things are somewhat predictable. And so that's what I meant by piggyback, okay? It was a way to preserve their wealth, get out of their existing system into something else. But these people are not very clever. They don't really understand the nature of decentralized and distributed software and what it's doing and how it's actually a trust machine, a transparent trust machine. So we know Bitcoin is not used to launder money, because you can go to blockchain.info and watch every single transaction that occurs. You just don't know who the participants are. And so you see that there are no big tranches of Bitcoin being converted into fiat, which would tell you that, oh, someone's laundered $4 billion worth of drug money today, and they bought $4 billion worth of Bitcoin. So should such a thing occur, the price of Bitcoin would just go whoosh, exactly. And as it will later on in this year as people try that. Now, also, I have to say, being as connected as I am into the cryptocurrency world, I get requests, okay, because people know I know other people. And so I won't say anything about any of the individuals involved, but I get requests at a reasonable level of frequency, once or twice a month, to where somebody will say, hey, this is so-and-so. I've got a friend of mine or whatever that wants to buy $40 million in Bitcoin. You know anybody that's selling? And they've got oil revenue that they've got to offset. They've sold 2 mansions in Australia that they've got to convert the cash into something. They may have made a major deal and sold out their company in China, that kind of thing. Yeah. And so I can tell you that there are indeed brokers that will try and put together those kind of deals. But the brokers are contacting me as well, saying, hey, anybody that's got enough Bitcoin to sop up this money? And it's like, no, guys, I don't know anybody with enough Bitcoin that's selling.
And if I did, I'd ask for a loan. At least I would. Let me tell you, right. Hey, you got 40 billion in Bitcoin. You want to toss one my way?
Right.
Just a Bitcoin. I don't mean a billion.
Right.
I mean a Bitcoin.
Right.
Okay. No, well, I mean, and this was when people have tried to make that claim. Pardon me. That Bitcoin was started up for money, and of course that was the official rhetoric back in 2012 and 13. Bitcoin's used for drug lords and black market money, etc. I was like, okay, how much did the guy pay for the pizza in New York?
10,000.
Yeah, 10,000 Bitcoin. Okay.
For 2 pizzas. For 2 pizzas.
For 2 pizzas. For 5,000 Bitcoin. Yeah. How much money laundering do you think they could have possibly done when Bitcoin was worth that much? And there was only X many mined. Seriously, like the logic of that was just ridiculous. Now, I've got something here. I want to ask you 2 questions on this. One is there was just recently an article coming out, and I think it was on Zero Hedge, and they were talking about, of course, Stripe has decided to turn around and say, oh, we're not going to do Bitcoin anymore. Mm-hmm. And in the article, an interesting comment was made. I can't remember who made it, if it was someone from Stripe, etc., that Bitcoin is not good as a currency. It's more like an asset, a commodity.
Correct. It's a digital asset.
Are we going to see if when we start seeing Bitcoin and it starts hitting 50,000, 100,000, 500,000, will it become the asset that backs the currencies, the smaller cryptocurrencies, if you will, that are going to be used? Will that be the asset that backs it, the system?
No.
Or will it be an independent stationary asset or commodity, if you will, all on its own?
The latter. Okay, it'll always be all on its own. No Bitcoin is going to be used to back other currencies. The value in cryptocurrencies is there due to the encryption and the scarcity. Most of the things have a known quantity, and so they're inherently scarce. and we know the encryption is a system really works. And then there's the digital, or the, excuse me, the distributed nature of the ownership and the pseudo anonymous state of the owners. All of these provide value for these for the currencies. Bitcoin was dropped and may be dropped by other payment processors because of the transaction fees. Okay, so initially when Bitcoin was $1, it cost you, you know, hardly any kind of a, even so small you couldn't measure it in a fraction of a penny to do a transaction in Bitcoin. But as Bitcoin scales up, the cost of the transaction fee scales too, and businesses don't like that. And also
it becomes a slide rule, and they want to know that their transaction fee is going to be a set transaction fee at all times, and they can't accept a slide rule.
Correct. And there's a few other quasi-political reasons within the Bitcoin community that this is the case, but it will be, and it will remain a digital asset and be used as a, in my data sets, we've had it as a currency of settlement for very large transactions. So it's not going to be something that you would buy and hold per se, but you might accumulate
to buy a pizza.
No, you might use it to settle the debt on oil payments from one country to another. That kind of thing, right? Where one country would transfer 7 Bitcoin to this other country to pay for all of the oil that they're going to buy that whole year, that sort of thing. So a very large level of settlement. So it's going to be a digital asset at that level. And other currencies with less intrinsic value or less inherent value in them will be used as the payment species across actually buying milk or, you know, your pot, or dealing with, you know, your electric bill, that sort of thing.
Okay, so in just a recent report you did, I'm sorry, I can't remember what show you were on. You were talking about China, and you've talked about it quite a bit, and I've talked about it as well. The fact that China is the real economic boom. This is where the global economic boom is going to come from. It's going to come from China. We're going to see this now. China, for all the saber rattling that we get with, they're going to do this, they're going to close down exchanges, or, you know, there's all kinds of rumors that run, but we know they're developing their own cryptocurrencies. We know that they're it's highly rumored, at least from what I've heard, that they're going to be developing asset-backed, possibly cryptocurrencies. And I have a big question of whether or not we're going to see the Shanghai gold market actually develop a gold-backed cryptocurrency that will run specifically through the Shanghai market. It seems to me that that's going to be one of their logical senses. So are these the coins to watch? The ones coming out of China, these cryptocurrencies, and the one
yeah,
Neo,
but I don't.
That's it. Neo. That's the word I was trying to come up with.
Yeah, Neo,
something
formerly
from the Matrix.
shares.
Damn.
Right, right. I always think of it as ant shares because I was aware of it way back when, and it was based off of the Long March of the Blue Ants when Mao Zedong took over China by literally marching all of the people from the Northwest into Beijing. And so they call it ant shares, and it's been rechristened as Neo. That's a non-mined coin or token that is on a network that is like a competitor to Ethereum. So the Neo stuff is like the Ethereum network. So Neo is very interesting.
It's a copy. It's a Chinese copy then.
No, it was there first.
Oh.
Okay, so AntShares existed before Ethereum as a working setup, and they've been able to evolve it and so on. So it's not a copy per se of Ethereum, and they don't actually even go to the same ends. But Neo is going to be a very good payment vehicle for the Chinese social order. So yeah, it would be valuable to own some Neo, I'm certain, over the course of time. It's not really a competitor to things that are being done in the West. The Chinese are doing things under the cover.
It's more internal infrastructure within the country itself. Okay.
Well, within the greater Chinese empire. Okay, so yes. So it actually makes sense if you're a business in Germany to be very connected to Neo, because you're going to be doing a lot of business with the Chinese in the future as the One Belt, One Road initiative brings the Berlin to Beijing railway to you. Yeah. And so you'll be able to use that Neo in dealing with your Chinese business partners. So there are those kinds of things going along with it. But the Chinese per se, they're an economic power because of not because of what they're doing with the cryptocurrencies per se, but because of the size of the population. The age of the population is dropping. The fact that they're in a sexual revolution now, which will further drop the age as they get into a predicted baby boom, and the fact that they graduate more engineers every year than we have people in our country, and so
Pretty
they're not
much.
graduating lawyers. They don't care so much about that, right? So they're
No,
a build-it out
tangibles.
country.
I'm sorry, because who fucking
Correct.
cares about lawyers? But tangible.
Correct.
Engineers, architects, these are the people who do a tangible job that actually makes the country work.
Correct. And so
Whereas
China
lawyers,
has all kinds. You're right. They have all kinds of issues. They have all kinds of troubles, and their position on the planet will always be set by such troubles because of their borders, the huge amount of people that are surrounding them, and all of these resource issues and so on. But nonetheless, they're going to be the dominant economic power for the next millennia, probably. So yeah, it's important to pay attention to them, but they have a tendency in certain areas that so they're very creative when it comes to engineering, and they are to a certain extent very conservative in their social engineering. No, not to a certain extent. They are very conservative in their social engineering. No question about it. And this is due to the fact that in a good year, they only have 75 to 85,000 riots that cost the life of a policeman, that kind of thing, right? They have so many riots and such social discord that they have a special emphasis within their social order to just dealing with that. In the last few years, those riot levels have been up into the 150,000s, shading towards 200,000. So it's a growing phenomenon. And so they're well aware of the stresses that are on their society. But they also have a huge amount of resources in the form of rare earths, and even more rare earths yet to be discovered off their coast. They have 9,000 plus miles of coast, and some very interesting mineral mounds are to be found in the South China Sea. So the fact that that's why they did the Spratly Islands and have started, building out their infrastructure there is because they're going to go into rare earth mining there in a serious way. Rare earths, by the way, begin with lithium, and we all know about lithium batteries.
Yeah.
And so there's all different kinds of stuff from the rare earths upward. And even if you wanted to think about it, although it doesn't exist as far as we know on this planet, element 115 would probably classify itself as a rare earth.
Yeah.
In the sense that it's an exotic metallic material.
Well,
Yes.
I mean, China, we've looked at China. I mean, China is all over Africa. I lived in the Congo. I lived in the DRC for a little while. And even there's a footprint. And when it comes to the mining, et cetera, I've got really good friends from Zimbabwe. The same thing. The Chinese are in there. They're in with the mining. And I can remember Obama having a complete hissy cow back in 2014. The damn China keeps buying up all those rare earth minerals, and they won't sell them back to us at a fair price, meaning we want to undercut the market, and they should sell them to us for cheaper. So, ridiculous. But they do. They have cornered that market. Which always gives me the thing of, like, when we start looking at stuff that's going to come out of Antarctica.
Right.
You're
going to need a lot of this material. Yep.
We're going to start. You can almost guarantee that this is, and we know that
this is the new technology. It's electric field manipulation. You're going to need some of these rare earths to be able to respond and be your field control interface to the field itself from your digital control vehicle. Yeah. And so, they're going to be extremely valuable. That's why also you'll see that there are certain, if you watch close enough and you follow certain corporations, you see that there's certain moves being made to open up exploration for minerals and so forth within the continental United States. And a lot of the former wilderness areas are being, or were classified that way and made into wildernesses specifically to keep the minerals and stuff that were in them until we get into the point where they can be used. Correct.
Until they're
keep them off the market. Yeah.
Well, this is okay. So I'm going to throw one last one because we're only 8 minutes to the hour, and I like to throw curveballs in the last couple of moments. We talked about Antarctica. The other thing, of course, I've been following really heavily is the Arctic. And I did a news show just earlier this week, and we were like, play out the rhetoric, what they say, the talking heads in the media say this. They always allude to oil, yet we know that oil is not the reason all this shit is going on in the Arctic. We know for a fact, because if they couldn't fucking pump oil out of the Arctic at $110 a barrel, they sure as hell can't do it when we're sitting at 50 and 40. Right. And Moody's just announced they're looking at for this 2018 between $40 to $60. Yeah, not going to happen. So it's not oil. we have a huge amount of action going on in the Arctic. To the point of one of the oil companies, it was an article from 2015 when Shell skedaddled. An article made a sub-point talking about how they were doing archaeological surveys, how they did the seismic geological surveys and archaeological surveys. And I was like, interesting choice of words. Why would you need to do an archaeological survey from the bottom of the Arctic Ocean?
That's a real good point.
Wait. Hold on. Let's back up. Because we go Antarctica, Arctica. 1947 we had, and the lead up to 47, we had all the shit going on down in Antarctica with Admiral Byrd. Where was he right before that? Oh, he was at the Arctic. And he went back and forth several times. And we had Operation Nanook that was going, and it's still going on to this day. We have Greenland, which is, there's a massive, big, huge question mark about what the fuck is going on in Greenland, because no one knows. No one fucking knows. So is your data sets pulling up anything about the Arctic?
Sure, tons and tons of stuff. It's also backed up by recent moves that we've seen materialize. So for instance, go back to China. China's got a border with Russia, but that's as far as they go to the north. And yet here they are in the Arctic Polar Alliance. Yep. They're up there all the time. They're now part of the Canadian and Russian and American tussling that's going on around
and
some
Denmark.
Of the resources.
Don't forget Denmark.
Yeah, and and Finland and Norway and all of these kind of guys. It extends down to Greenland. Greenland's really an interesting case because it is a recently frozen entity, and it's very volcanic and so on. The nature of the the fact that we have volcanoes up near the Arctic and down in the Antarctic areas are very specifically focused on by scientists who are of the opinion that there's going to be a different level of outpouring of material from those volcanoes than from volcanoes on the middle of the ocean and volcanoes on land and so on. So the volcanoes that we're seeing going off in Japan, Philippines, those kind of places, ring of fire now, when they blow up, they bring up certain kinds of crystals. They bring up, including diamonds and this kind of thing. But the spread of material that they have in them is relatively constrained, and it goes from a lot of bauxite, a lot of aluminum, and it goes over to some of the heavier metals, and will include sometimes gold, but only in small quantities. And that's really about as far as it goes. This is not necessarily true of the polar volcanoes. So there's that. Okay, they may be thinking that this is where primal material is coming from, and maybe they can like tap the rare earths as they're being pumped out by the planet.
So literally, and that was going to be my question: are they looking for rare earth metals?
They're looking for something. Now here's some other interesting thing from the Russian perspective. I love the Russians because they're really into the woo-woo side of it, right? They're into the strange mystery of it all. And so when a Russian polar, I don't know his background beyond a certain level. He is academic now, but I don't know that he is like a PhD level kind of academic, but he's a Russian polar explorer, and he's doing work in their polar effort. And I knew him before he went to work for their polar effort back almost to like 1998 or so. So in the midst of the Soviet Union breakup and the Russian Revolution and stuff, I connected with this guy. One of the things he pointed me to when you bring up Arctic issues, especially the Arctic Ocean issues and the submarine activity and this kind of thing that's going on around there, he points me to the middle of the Pacific, okay, to the Great Desert, what he and I both know as the Great Desert. It's the largest single desert on the planet, and it's at the bottom of the Pacific Basin, at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean. Now, something needs to be known about our oceans. The land at the bottom of the oceans is newer than all of the land in all of the continents. Yeah. So when the Earth expands, it creates new land at the bottom of the oceans, and the Earth keeps expanding. There is no such thing as a subsidence zone. There's no such thing as tectonic plate activity where the Pacific plate drops in under the North American plate. Horseshit, absolute misunderstanding of everything. And it was just the lie that we all agreed to pretend was history, right? Okay, so this guy, in the nature of his work, can't or is reluctant to discuss certain parts of it. So he points me at the bottom of the Pacific Ocean to a specific set of coordinates. And if one goes even on Google Earth to look at this particular area of the Pacific Ocean, and you just go straight down, straight down, straight down in their maps, you see some incredible things that are totally unexplained. And they are, they're giant hemispheres that are many miles across, that are moving on the bottom of the Pacific Ocean and leaving a wide trail behind them that's several miles wide. I think 5, 6, maybe 7 miles wide. Sure, yeah, you can see them, and you can see the rate of progress. Yeah. You can make estimations as to how fast they're moving, which is not very fast at all. No. They're large enough that if it was a dome over a city in there, you might have 65,000 people living in that city. Okay, we can't really estimate, I can't, in an effective way with the information we've got as to the height of this thing. But just based on what I see in the way of the wake, so to speak, the trail left in the sediment and the spillover behind it of that sediment, I think the spillover height is several hundred feet high. Okay, so I think this thing is so heavy that it's pushed way into the muck and the mud, and whatever its motive force, as it goes through that muck and mud, it leaves a trail behind it several miles wide, 7, 8 miles maybe, with the walls of that trench being several hundred feet high. So we're talking about a giant mass that is continually moving down at the bottom of the ocean, shows no sign of it having ever stopped. It's not stopped now. We don't know what it's doing, but there are regular mechanistic style grid marks where it's been, as though there were puncture marks or holes or something, as though it may have been doing mining, although that's a supposition, because they could have been motive force. Maybe it sticks in a bunch of sticks, gets that as an anchor point, and uses it to push on.
Is it expanding?
No, the object itself is always stayed the same size.
It's moving.
It's moving. It appears to be metallic. It's not rock. The reflection we get from the light and stuff, which of course is distorted being at the bottom of the ocean, would seem to suggest that it is metallic, if somewhat lumpy, and has sediment that's fallen on it over the eons, based on its rate of travel and the estimates that are coming out of it. The trail that is visible between these two ridges that it warps around, it's not going in a straight line, it's meandering and doing all these curlicues and weird things. But it's been doing that for at least the last 200 years from this one trench area. Something occurred that caused the ocean to split at that point, another expansion event. And so at one point it was on the other side of this ridge that we presume it could not, at this point, overcome, right? It's just on a very flat area in this great desert area. And it is as though the planet had an expansion event and created a little mountain ridge, and now it's on one side of it, and the trail goes up to that ridge and then not across, and then on the other side, and you can see where the trail itself had been disturbed by whatever that event was. So within the last couple of hundred years, there was an earthquake or a shifting of some of the material down there that caused this separation in its path, and apparently didn't bother this critter at all. And the real shocking part of all of this is it's not alone.
Does it give off any magnetic fields?
I don't know. There's just, it's very hard to get any kind of information about any of this stuff. Once you get so far into it, you run into a solid wall of no information.
You shall not pass.
You got it. And so you can go so far with like NASA photos, with Google Earth photos, and so on. You can find some oblique references within NASA to some of their associations with some of the oceanographic institutions on the planet, and some references to observing this thing. So they're watching it. There's also some suggestions that stuff goes in and out of it at a very fast rate. So if you look into it, there's this stuff
like
called
an ejection, like as it
is
it ejecting as it moves. I'm trying to think.
More like it's a city, and vehicles are coming and going from the city. Okay, much more like that. Because see, here's the thing. I know a lot of guys that are actually curiously involved in the submarine world, that actually work on submarines or this sort of thing. I know a guy whose job is to connect fiber optic cables under the ocean, big fiber optic cables, giant, 3 and 4 and 5 feet across, right?
The big, massive ones. I've seen them. We
right,
have them
and by curiously, the last time I talked to him, he just sent me this little blurb that said, "Hey, we just completed it. We just completed a three of these giant things, so over 10 feet in diameter, cable connection between Antarctica and Brazil. And it was his job to do the connection in Brazil. So he's that connected. But anyway, all of these submarine guys, they talk about something, or there's allusions within the language that they use to them among themselves. And the language is never explained outside of their environment, but is obviously has a lot of context and meaning within their environment. And they said the word, and I'm going to try and see if I can remember it. It's like fast movers, okay? And so there's this fast mover program. And the fast mover program exists whether it's a Russian submarine, a German submarine, or an American submarine. And the fast mover program is to watch, record, and tag, so to speak, time and date and all of this direction of these fast mover objects. And these fast mover objects are defined as anything in the water that is moving faster than 250 miles an hour.
Whoa.
So exactly. At the rate that we now know the Soviets are trying to get their hypersonic torpedoes to go.
They ain't even close to that.
Correct. And most of the fast movers are in the 600 and 700 miles per hour range at the
and okay, give us an idea of size dimension. When you talk, like, are they 20 foot across? Are they 5 foot across?
There's some small ones indeed that show up, and those are the anomalies apparently. So the small fast movers are not the most common. The large, or let's just say that the usual size range, so now let's stop for a second and say they have difficulty, the submarine guys, in estimating much more than the speed accurately, because the speed through the water distorts all of their ability to get other information. Sonar doesn't work accurately, so they can't get mass expectation math to work. So they're guessing at a lot of this. But the guesstimates seem to be fairly consistent across the mover programs, regardless of whether it's Russian or US. And the guesstimates would tend to put these things at about the size of 7 or 10 of our submarines. So really big. So say a couple of 747s smushed together into some shape that just moves at 500 miles an hour under the water.
So
and
is
then
this
sometimes
being seen under the Arctic as well?
Well, see, there's the thing.
He alluded to this.
Correct.
Is that the allegory that he's trying to say? Like,
that was my supposition, that they're up there looking at something that's of a similar intriguing nature. Because see, here's the deal: the Arctic Ocean is one of the most shallow oceans. All right. Okay, so the Pacific being the largest and the deepest, and the newest ocean, well, it's the oldest new ocean. It was the first ocean. Okay, so let me put it that way.
I get the distinction. Yes.
Okay, so the Arctic is shallow. Also shows the effects of expansion events, and that the bottom of the Arctic Ocean is very new material, but it's relatively shallow compared to all of the other oceans. And so if you were going to watch something like these kind of critters, doing it on the bottom of the Pacific, you could get so close and then that's it. You've got to resort to remote vehicles because you can't even get submarines down to where these things are. That's another aspect of this, that our subs cannot go down.
They can't go that deep.
Correct.
Exactly. Okay, so here's
but they could in the Arctic, see.
In 2016, August 2016, an article came, September 2016, an article came out of Canada about a noise was heard in the Arctic Ocean. They heard this noise. And they decided that we got to go investigate. Where's this noise coming from?
Right.
Not another, I mean, literally, I searched, I cross-referenced. Not another word was said. And then you go, okay, but why the announcement? Every time they put out an announcement like that, it's always me, okay, why did you announce it?
Right.
Why did you announce it? Why are you announcing it now? What's the point? Isn't it an excuse? Just like, oh yeah, we heard a knock, so we just thought we'd go run over here and go take a look. So they have an excuse to be there? Or was there an actual event that they're giving notice on and saying?
I think it's the latter, and I think they do it out of fear. So sometimes I think they put this information out because they're afraid that other people will find it, and they want to preempt it, so to speak, by getting that emotional stuff to dissipate ahead of it appearing under certain circumstances.
Yeah.
So if you can control the narrative, all right, so let's look at it this way. If I, as a speaker, I want to do certain things in a certain order to build my story up and then down and up and down and up and down, just like in a movie, you know, bring your emotions up and crash you down a bit and so on, bringing it up to the crescendo at our conclusion of Act 3 kind of a deal, right? And I want to control the narrative that the audience receives. And it may be that sort of thing, that they would prefer to have the initial appearance of some of these things at times when there's so much emotional scattering that there won't be an emotional wave that builds up under this idea, which they can sort of guess at, but they can't really control as to how it's going to form. And so they're attempting to dissipate or dilute or pollute the what they think may be a release that's going to be coming out later. So there were some hints in the 90s when they first put up that satellite that they knew they were looking for something.
Yeah.
There were some hints there. No one picked up on it. Of course, the internet wasn't as mature and so on, but no one gave a damn. And then in 2002, the announcement comes out. There was a lot of flurry in specific areas, and then it just damped off, and you just don't hear about it anymore. Never again is it referenced in officialdom anywhere. But if it should hit a reference, they can just point back to, oh yeah, it was an anomaly that we discovered in 2002, and no big deal. Yeah.
And that's
you know, somebody like horseshoe magnet we found under the ice. Yeah.
It was the world's biggest magnet. We had to call Guinness Book of World Records to come down there.
Right.
Well,
and then we found out we had to pay for it, and we didn't do it.
I was fuck that. No way.
Yeah.
Well, this is it. And with the Arctic, there's certain things that we watch repeat. And I watch for repeating cycles. I watch for repeating cycles in the news. Repeating events, i.e., you know, the buildup of like the ships and who's putting the ships there and the military exercises. And now it's a big thing about they need satellite devices, like major new. Canada's going to spend billions of dollars to put all this new satellite communication equipment up there.
Mm-hmm.
And you just think, yeah, but we're not buying into the whole Russia's the bad guy war thing. So let's take that. Toss it out. It ain't the oil. We've already disproved that. They bring it up again and again, and sometimes it's about every 6 months now. I watch a major hit, and it's like as if they touch something, and then they sit back and they watch how everyone reacts. And then 6 months later, they go in and they give it another little shove to watch how the public react. Are they waiting for a moment to announce something? Or are they, like you just said, are they trying to get ahead of something? Say, look, no, we knew.
And see, there's their problem, because they're caught between all of us, and we can drown them in our urine, and they're caught between us and what's on the other side. And so they know that they don't want to turn us all into an angry mob sort of a deal. So they've got to, at some level, appear to be competent. Now, the problem comes into this in the way of thinking, going back to my Russian polar explorer, okay, because he and I have had some discussions about the satellite stuff, and he goes to me for satellite sort of information because he knows I really follow that. And he was curious about some things. And so I'm going to say that it is my opinion that he was curious about these satellites because he had encountered the reality that I'm about to suggest could exist. And that reality is that we know submarines and other vessels have been running into shit all around the planet, have since 2000 or so. There have been a lot of expansion events. The undersea channels change. Submarines bump into things. We've had all kinds of problems there. We've also had all kinds of U.S. ships that have been going wonky, okay, in terms of their driving ability.
Just now let's dead.
Right. Or they actually hunt out something to run into. Right. Yeah, so let's suppose a couple of things. What if we're not in charge of our oceans as humans? What if we don't control the oceans? What if there's another power down there that is not human necessarily that actually does control the oceans? Well, then to a certain extent, at some point, your ships are useless because that other power won't let you see anything with the ships. And as a spy vehicle, they would know that ship was over them and was beaming down and looking at them. Yeah. Wouldn't necessarily know that about satellites. Okay, so satellites would be a way of examining the bottom of the ocean without tipping off whatever is down there that you're looking at it necessarily. Looking at it. Correct. Satellites also give you a view that ships can't, because the satellite view is very much wider than any ship is ever going to be able to provide, or any number of ships. And so the satellites in the polar orbits are very interesting, especially with all of the satellite launches that are going on everywhere at the moment, all the time now. And as we alluded to earlier, the strange things that are happening within our atmosphere, including the spires of light that are just existent and they shouldn't exist. They're not related to fog or any of that.
No, like where the hell did those things come? I know.
And they're
I was
not
going to actually bring
lasers.
those up. Like there's just, like I said, crazy shit.
Right. And so all this crazy shit's going on. What are you going to do? Well, one thing to do would be to rush your satellites up and then have them look back down on Earth to see what the hell is happening in areas you're not able to get at now. And so there's also a situation where we might have run into the 2010 version of what happened in the 70s. Okay, so in the 1970s, late 60s through to about 82 or 3, I think, okay, there was a whole lot of airplane crashes. I'm talking a lot of commercial airplane crashes all around the planet from all the different airlines. And nowadays, you just don't have airplane crashes to speak of, right? They're so rare that they're actually now thought
newsworthy.
They're extremely newsworthy, and even they're so rare now, it's thought to be not an accident, but a deliberate bringing it down to kill somebody by the bad guys. They're that rare. In the 70s, they were happening very frequently and stuff in weird, unexplained ways. So there is some chatter out there among the military professionals that what we ran into in the 70s waves of air crashes was 60s and 70s was retribution or tit for tat kind of thing from space aliens, because we were actively trying to shoot them down. Okay, so during the 60s and 70s, we were trying to shoot their stuff down, and at some point the space alien recognizes that us ants were nibbling on its
slapped
ankle.
The mosquito back.
Correct. And it just sort of brushed them off, and it was sort of a little warning. You guys keep this up and we'll just keep crashing your airplanes, right? You know, and it was a minimalist response and got us off their case. We backed off of that. We haven't been trying to shoot them down except in a couple of circumstances. And since then, it's been, if you will, a weird kind of a period, if we want to think about it that way, where we had all of this activity. We had 47, we had the saucer appearances throughout the 50s that were staggering. In 1952 everywhere. And 53 over Congress, over Mars attacks kind of spaceships floating up over Congress, right? And those kind of things which just aren't even touched or discussed anymore. And throughout that period of time, we also developed this aggressive attitude, and we tried to shoot the buggers down. We then get into the airplane crashes. Since then, we stopped trying to shoot them down. Now they're around everywhere. The skies are filled with stuff, but the officialdom is staying way the hell out of it. Only now they actually have to respond. And so we've got the Tom DeLonge thing. We've got this continuous resurfacing of the idea of disclosure. We've got the paid disinfo ops like the blue chicken cult, all of these kind of people that are being paid for by the CIA. And Jay Widener, who's, I'm having an email fight with him at the moment, and we're calling each other nasty names, sort of. But he was saying certain things about it, and he was saying, oh, blah, blah, so-and-so owns Gaia TV, the TV channel that promotes the blue avian, the blue space chicken cult, right? And I had to point out to him, that fellow owns less than 25%. 75% of that company ownership goes up to and disappears inside the CIA. Yeah. So is the CIA paying to promote the blue chicken cult because they've got to keep, not because the cult itself is worthwhile, but because they must keep the idea of disclosure ticking over in our heads, because it must happen, because we're reaching a point where whatever it is they're watching at the bottom of the ocean, whatever it is that's coming in these water envelopes, whatever it is that's causing the effects in the atmosphere with these weird lights and stuff, as well as the meteors and all of that kind of stuff, is all coming to it's all coming to a crescendo. Now, the really weird part of all of this is that way back when I first started doing this work in 1997, and I made that first run, from that point forward, I have always had data sets in there that go to the idea that not the power elite, but the people who do things, so the military, the intelligence, and all of these kind of people, that there was a current of fear that was motivating all of their activity, and it could be encapsulated back to the idea of they're coming. So they know, they've been afraid, and it's been leaked out of their language since 1998, and it still is in the data sets to this day. It's never waned. It's always been this strong. And so are they actually in fear of space aliens coming back to Earth and returning, and we're unprepared for it because we're not addressing it as adults, and yet they can't think they're so unclever, they are so clever but so uncreative, they can't think their way out of this situation.
Well, not just even, I mean, just the fact that if they, the quintessential whatever it is that comes back or comes, whatever, and just bring some facts. Here's the truth.
Yeah.
Here's the truth. Here's your history. This is what happened 10, 15, 20, 100 million years ago, which throws everything that we've been programmed, force-fed, out the window. So, I mean, it means Grandma's been lying to you the entire fucking time, and the last thing she wants is for Grandpa to come home and debunk every story she's just told.
Right.
Right? And it's funny because you used an analogy when you were talking to Sarah, and she said you were talking about you used South Africa as the example, and we talk about like the grief, the trauma that goes through when people come to truth, when all of a sudden all this shit lands on them. And I've always said for the longest time, because the excuse it's given out in the very much in the kind of that new age blue chicken cult kind of way, I was like, oh, we have to do it gently, it got to be gentle because people will be too upset. And I'm of the version of like, rip the fucking Band-Aid off.
Take your pain
seriously
out.
just rip the Band-Aid off. You go, ow, maybe it even bleeds a little bit, and you go, okay, give me a tissue. Okay, I'm better now, let's move, let's get on with shit. And that's what it feels like right now. I work with a pretty crazy group of people who are quite energetically sensitive, if you will, for lack of better words. And the feeling that we've had since 2000, especially in 2015, was that they, the quintessential they, are desperately trying to get ahead of something. Mm-hmm. It was palpable. You could feel that, and it was as if they thought they had X amount of time, and all of a sudden they came flat face to face with like, holy shit, no, we don't have 2 more years, or we don't have however what years. Time stamp, 100 years. It's right fucking now, and we got to do something about it, and we've got to, and it feels like everything since that point of early 2015 has been a race. Yeah. A race of they're trying anything they can to distract, to themselves play catch up, somehow kind of gather up their little pieces and somehow make it into something that is tangible that they can hang on to, whether you want to call that, whether it's like literally in physical assets, like trying to gather up all their piggy banks and shove them in a sack, or literally their power structure. Like they're trying to find the shreds. What shred can we hang on to when this all blows? What's left for me? And I loved your analogy of like the criminals are all now going, oh, never mind the whole cartel over here. I just got to look after myself and start filling my own pockets because this is it.
Right, shit's going down. Well, the part that I find very intriguing is not so much the fear of the ruling elite, because as I say, they're not particularly clever, and so their fears are going to be able to be directed against them, and their actions are predictable within their range of fears and stuff. What I find very interesting is the deep thinkers that are within the support structures for the powers that be. So there's a lot of stuff you can read in various different little niches that are stashed here and there around on the internet, where these deep thinkers for the military, for the CIA, and all of these kind of people have speculated on certain things. The speculations I find to be very intriguing because they're printed in officialdom kind of language and officialdom kind of publications. And some of these are used as teaching aids, so to speak, or attempting to direct the audience based on a particular theory here. But some of the academics who think for the military have raised some interesting subject matter. The interesting subject matter it has a larger path and then a smaller path within that larger path. Okay, so the subject matter would be around the idea that they, space aliens, are coming back. And it's specific that they're coming back.
Back.
Okay, and so they've been here before, but they're not here now. And so some of the speculation that comes off of it from that point on gets really interesting. And the long path is the least interesting. And the long path is they're coming back. We have to be prepared to defend ourselves against them because we know them to be aggressive and we know them to be not favorable towards humans. And they have all these reasons for saying that, for thinking that they know this. The shorter path is, I find, more intriguing, and it's actually based on the same concept of we know they're coming back, we have to be prepared to defend ourselves, and we know they've been here before. And this shorter path is not about defense in the sense of military. It's about defense in the sense of legal. Okay, because here's the thinking. The shorter path in there I find very intriguing because you have these academics who are preparing and thinking about the notion of a species that comes back to Earth, a very powerful species just to arrive here. It arrives here in such a way that it's undeniable because they just come in the millions perhaps and land, and they claim to own us.
Mm-hmm.
They claim to own Earth and have created humanity, and then they just had to take a vacation. All of us puppies kept breeding, and now they've come back to get all the puppies, right?
Uh-huh.
And so that's the thinking on it. And so these guys, these academics, are thinking about our legal stance in defending ourselves. And I've referenced this in the ending, in the conclusion bits of some of my reports, as the wild strain. All right.
Yeah, I was just listening to you talk about that a couple of days ago, the wild strain. Yeah. I love that theory.
Yeah, so what we do is we postulate that indeed our history is correct. And let's just go over it real quick. We'll just glance right through it. The Nummo come to this planet, they end up creating us. They come here with the intent to do genetic modification. One of their number causes a huge, horrific global accident. They come back and repair the planet, and we are as we are now because they had to repair the planet from damage that was caused by one of their own. And so all the species that exist now were created by the Nummo. Space happens, time happens, and along come the people that we call the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki land here, and because the Nummo are not here, the Anunnaki claim to create us. And we don't know any different. These are very powerful beings, spaceships, they float around, they zap people, they're not particularly nice, and we call them gods. And from that point on, all of our god myths, Zeus and all of this, reference demented personalities with their own twisted needs and ungodlike behavior at every example, exactly. Human sacrifice, all of this kind of stuff. But what's really interesting is the human sacrifice component of it. And so you find a contention of thinkers at an academic level within those that support military and the industrial complex that are going to the idea of what would happen if the Anunnaki came back. Not the Nummo, who we know are basically benevolent, but the Anunnaki who did not create us. They may have monkeyed about with our genetics after the fact, but they're not the genetic creators that the Nummo were. And then we even have that up here in the Salish myths, where the changer changes all of life, and it's all discourse through the raven and through Changer. And Changer talks to Raven and tells all about it, and Changer goes away. And Changer was known to be a member of the Star People. And then at some point later on, the Sky People come, and the Sky People are not nice. They kidnap and do horrible things to humans, and the indigenous people have a not nice relationship with the Sky People, and they hide from them and do battle with them wherever they can, although mostly it just ends up with the humans being killed. And anyway, those Sky People are not nice. Well, what if the Sky People are the Anunnaki? What if they come back and attempt to make a legal claim on us? What shall be humans' response to that, right? Or humanity's response to that? And that's what these thinkers are going to along those ideas. In the late 90s, in doing those initial runs in my data sets, I came across this weird fear that the powers that be were expressing in their leaks in their language, all about the fear of something. And then ultimately, over time, it matures to where we have more of the fear about their coming back. And then I discovered these these thought exercises that go not to how to defend ourselves with, throwing lead at them, but rather how to defend ourselves, but at a consciousness if you will, legalistic level within the structure that should be presented at that time. And there's actually individuals that are thinking about this and are being paid to think about this for, of all kinds of weird places, the U.S. military, which, while it might buy a $24,000 toilet seat in order to hide money, they don't usually pay for stuff that's not going to be practical or pragmatic at that kind of level, at least not in any quantity. So there's these two aspects of the fear thing in the powers that be that I find to be extremely intriguing relative to that question, you know. And then how would you deal with that?
There's so many pieces, and this is the point where we can instantly go into another 2-hour show, because I've been dealing with that question myself for at least 5 years, and then you get Corey Good playing it out, and from the legal aspect. Yeah. So I'm going to say, let's just stop. Just take a moment. Because this could go, and we can't do this. It's already 12:30 at night where I am.
Okay.
Yeah. I would love to have you back on to continue this conversation at some point when we can get our schedules together. This conversation enters into a really interesting rabbit hole on so many levels. So many levels, but especially the legal level. I would love to have that conversation.
It also ties back to quantum computers too, and the quantum universal internet, because you'd need to have access to all of those records and stuff if you're going to try and present a case.
Cliff, don't do that to me.
Sorry.
I'm not going to sleep tonight. Okay.
Well, get to work on that quantum modem.
Yeah, I'll start building one in my garage tomorrow.
There you go.
After I get a nap. I'll run down to Antarctica, see if they got some neutrinos they can lend me.
Right.
I want to thank you, Cliff. This has been a fantastic conversation, and I know we got some pieces here to revisit, because I need to mull a few things over as well in my head. You've given me some interesting shit to think about, especially this last topic. We'll definitely have you back on when we can figure out the whole schedule thing. But I want to thank you. It's been awesome.
Yep. Thank you much. It's been great. Always love having woo-woo conversations like this. It's been very nice.
Yeah.
Sorry to keep you up.
No, this is regular show time for me. The only way I can kind of balance, I can get just Australia at 8 o'clock in the morning, and Pacific Coast out there for daytime. That's what we do. And all my poor Russian friends have to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to watch the show. That's what you do. That's okay. Guys, I want to thank you guys all for joining us on the live stream, and our very, very small, tiny audience who were my note takers, studiously taking notes in there. Thank you, Jeff. We'll definitely have you back, and I'll talk to you very, very soon.
Okay. Thank you much.
Good night, everyone. Bye.